What if Deku was reincarnated to Konosuba? How would this change everything? Before we start, I want you guys to subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, and also share this video with your friends. It will really mean a lot to me. You can also check other what ifs on the channel. The like aim for this video is 200. Your support keeps me motivated to bring more amazing what ifs for you guys. Now let's begin. A humble lesson. Union watched the situation unfold before her, trying really hard to understand what was happening, and why it was happening in the first place. Liza, take these guys to the surface. Izuku commanded, earning a grunt and a firm nod from the albino gator girl. They are free now, and Lean must be worried sick for them. As the daughter of the village's chief, Union knew that going overboard was the trademark of the Crimson Demon tribe. Either by exaggerating mannerisms, or using the flashiest and strongest spells available, they had to leave a strong impression wherever they went. But what Megumin's boyfriend intended to do. Megumin, Union. Izuku called, sounding serious and cool, like a true heroic leader. I need you two to draw a sacrificial magic circle. Make sure it will not take anything living or souls. Yes. Both Crimson Demons replied, scrambling to do as commanded. Reincarnation was a weird spell, unique to Archdruids, and officially considered as undesirable for the common adventurer. The spell used twice the amount of mana compared to the more acceptable resurrection, randomly selecting a new race and sometimes gender for the target. The mana cost also increased according to the time the target had been dead, making the idea of resurrecting an ancient lich ludicrous. Bring all the hoard from our treasure chamber. To the last coin. Keel commanded to his minions, earning cheers from the 6 whites at his command, and a horde of zombies and skeletons following suit. Today we'll be free. Izuku had countered Union's worries by mentioning an option that most spellcasters had at their disposal. The sacrificial magic circle allowed the sacrifice of material resources in order to power up spells. However, no sane spellcaster used it because the monetary cost was considered wasteful. This necessity was theorized by some academies, as the cost in money seemed to be related to the perceived value of the spell. Megumin, Union called in a hushed tone as she kept working on the magic circle. There is no way this would work. As an accomplished archwizard who had spent most of her time studying magic and its principles, she knew that the mana conversion ratio was unbearable. The best outcome recorded demonstrated that the coin used was twice the cost of the mana potions that would have been used to perform the spell. Of course this shouldn't work. Megumin replied with a smile, not stopping for a moment, just like his Genetic World 3, or my Big Bang. Union nearly recoiled at what she perceived as mockery, or sarcasm. She had no idea of what this Genetic World 3 was, but Megumin's Big Bang was a super destructive spell that no one could claim to know how it worked. Even the idea of knowing the intricacies behind the blocks of reality seemed too otherworldly to not be part of some forbidden knowledge that actually existed. But we are talking about Izuku, my boyfriend. Megumin continued, throwing a smug grin towards her fellow archwizard. At the very least, this will work as intended. Although this will most likely surpass expectations. Meanwhile, outside the dungeon, 3 guys finally reunited with their last party member. Lean had been worried out of her mind, her imagination getting the best of her by conjuring images of the 3 idiots she called friends being cursed, drained of all blood, and/or being stripped of their flesh. Seeing them alive and well was better than a healing potion. You idiots. Lean screamed as her conflicted emotions failed to settle between her aching heart and her overactive imagination. I was worried beyond reason. As the boys descended into a flurry of apologies, and even sharing with her their well-earned reward, a certain pink-haired ranger couldn't help but sigh at the scene. Even this unremarkable girl was having far more success than her. I don't get it, Keel muttered to herself, still practicing her aim with her light crossbow. What did I do wrong? Or was it my clothes? Taking a moment to look at her clothes, she nearly chuckled. She'd forgotten that she had changed her outfit just a day ago. Izuku had called her miniskirt impractical, and instead suggested a new outfit. Keel's fear of being nearly stripped was shut down when he had provided the clothes. Khaki shorts, green tunic, leather boots and bracers. For the ranger, it was probably the tamest outfit she could wear. It was almost the opposite of what Kayaya had chosen for her, and it felt comfortable, while giving her a sense of safety, as nothing private was in any danger of being shown to the world. To make things even more depressing, after dressing in a more sensible way, she was finally being taken more seriously in the guild. Chika wants to be by Master's side. The whispery voice of the black harpy returned the attention of the ranger to the present, with a pronounced shiver running down her spine. Horrible voice aside, Yula could now understand why the archdruid kept the harpy. She was loyal to a fault, obedient too. Not to mention useful, as she was capable of distracting opponents in combat, and able to deliver messages and small packages if needed. She was pretty to look at, after you managed to pass over the talons and feathers. The gator girl was on a different level though. For a brute slave, she was surprisingly tame, to the point of making her doubt all the rumors and warnings about Liza's race. She was of course dumber than her lizardfolk cousins, but her unbelievable strength and obsessive devotion made up for all that. She had, after all, successfully escorted the adventurers back to their party member, and managed to clearly deliver Izuku's message. That reminded her of the impossibility of the situation. Her new party leader was dealing with Keel the Lick. How does someone deal with a lick? Hila muttered to herself again. It wasn't a fight. Liza had been clear on her report. Peacefully dealing with the lick. Had it been any other party leader, it would made her laugh. Kayaya would have destroyed the abomination in an instant, although, a lick willing to parley was something new to her. Would Kayaya attack someone willing to talk? Adam? All thoughts were interrupted by the tremor that traveled beneath her feet. Or maybe, it was something gentler, like a heartbeat. Looking around, Hila finally noticed that the other party had already left, and darkness seemed a little bit restless. The demi-humans seemed perfectly calm though. Adam. The second tremor was slightly stronger, and was accompanied by a sudden surge of mana. It was a very large concentration of it. Back inside the dungeon, Union knew that the Archdruid wasn't normal from the get-go, but this was pushing even the normalcy of the Crimson Demon clan. Megumin was grinning like a madwoman, clearly enjoying the sight before them. The mountain of gold coins, jewels and even magic items, was piled inside the sacrificial magic circle. The objective was to return a lick to life, which in turn would end the foul necromancy that bound his servants to this world. It was a mountain of gold, probably enough to buy her entire village, and the services of all her clan. Just looking at it hurt her, and she was meant to stay still and watch it disappear. Tap tap. Izuku tapped his staff against the stone floor. The sound reverberated through the narrow hallways, echoing far into the depths of the underground structure. Oh, Wheel of Death and Rebirth. Hear my voice, listen to my plea. Izuku intoned. His staff, made of iron bark, topped with 3 beautiful jet black long feathers, was waved gently in smooth circles above his head. The mana in the room was activated, and everyone, living or undead, could feel the resonance. Life must end for life to begin again, but these souls still have roles to play in this time. Union immediately caught that something was wrong. The spell was meant for a single target, and yet, Izuku had talked in plural. Megumin's smug grin only startled the other Crimson Demon more. Let them pass through the cleansing cycle of death, let them retain themselves on rebirth. The sacrificial circle activated, and the gold coins were quickly turning into pure mana, fueling the altered spell. Union noticed that Izuku never turned to look at the vanishing piles of gold. In fact, he didn't show any level of concern for the amount of riches being destroyed. Let go of your old life, sins and shackles. Start anew. Reincarnation. Emerald light bathed the room and filled the hallways with ease, blinding everyone for a minute. When Megumin and Union recovered their sight, they were witnesses to one of the most unbelievable images they had laid eyes upon. Keel and his whites were gone. What happened? A gruff voice sounded. It belonged to a male dwarf. Are we really alive? A female dwarf spoke now. It seemed so. A female halfling took her turn to speak. But why? A male halfling countered. Why am I now a woman? A human woman shouted in distress. Lucky you, a human man added in sarcasm, taking a troubled look at his body, seemingly wishing to be of a different gender. The 6 whites had been reincarnated. But that wasn't the most impressive feat. Keel, the gorgeous female elf, with golden hair signaling her heritage of a high elf, spoke. Is it you? Her sweet voice, coupled by being cradled by who could only be Keel himself, made the situation look like a scene taken from a love novel. Speaking of Keel, my beloved. A rather handsome male dark elf asked back, his brown skin sharply contrasted with his silver hair. My dear Sasha. My love. Sasha yelled as she embraced Keel. I couldn't stand watching you suffer here while I was at the gates of heaven. Seeing those scoundrels attack you brought me to madness. Keel couldn't answer or say more. Having his beloved in his arms, even if she was in a different body, even if her voice was not the same, it was too much. The once powerful Lick was crying his heart out. Not only was he free of the curse of undeath, he had been given a chance to enjoy life with the one he loved the most. Union couldn't fully process the events happening before her very eyes. An archdruid would obviously reincarnate someone recently dead. Only the leaders of the circles could claim to be able to reincarnate someone who has been dead for a year. Her party leader reincarnated 7 ancient undead people, and a woman who had been dead for just as long, with a single casting. What was he then? Izuku. Megumin's sudden scream earned everyone's attention. Izuku had collapsed, and the petite arch-wizard was doing her best to help him. Take him to the bed. Keel immediately commanded, and be careful, that young man is more worthy than a hero. The 6 now reincarnated lieutenants obeyed without hesitation, even when they were no longer under any sort of compulsion to obey. About 2 hours later, I'm fine, Izuku bemoaned, still laying in the old bed. Really, I only need something to eat. All his good berries had dried up, rendering them unusable. Running out of mana was far more debilitating than the archdruid thought possible. He really wondered how Megumin got used to such a horrible feeling. Food. Food. Chika barely managed to keep her voice to a whisper, making all the newly reincarnated people flinch. Good thing we had some food packaged. A satchel with random things, mostly dried food, was soon passed to Liza, who almost tore it apart, so her dear master could get the food as soon as possible. Master, eat, Liza said as she, as gently as she could, placed a piece of dried meat into Izuku's mouth. Master, better. Megumin, Keel and his beloved couldn't help but chuckle at the scene of clumsy love. It took a few minutes for everyone to notice that the reincarnated high elf was naked, and a couple more for a proper dress to be found and given to her. Union was still trying to hopelessly comprehend what had happened. It shouldn't be possible, Union muttered in a corner, occasionally stealing glances at Izuku. Not only did he modify the spell, he actually managed to use the sacrificial circle without breaking concentration. As she watched the archdruid continue to freely interact with the demi-humans, and the recently reincarnated, Union began to allow her heritage to take over her thoughts. Among all the crazy delusions, above all the over-the-top ideologies among her people, one train of thought remained as their anchor to sanity. What if someone proved to be even more outlandish than them? So, Megumin's voice broke through Union's rampaging thoughts. How are we going to explain all of this to the guild? There weren't enough Theatrix in the entire Crimson Demon clan to answer that question. Guild Hall, well into the afternoon, Luna was at the verge of a nervous breakdown. Not only was she running out of time to come up with a plan to convince Izuku and his party to not leave town, but now she was dealing with the aftermath of an unsanctioned rescue operation. Even if it had been successful. Seriously. Thus was, again, shouting out his allies' praises, Izuku swooped in like a hero of legend. Usually, Luna would expect laughter at the remark, but the situation had been so serious that most adventurers and guild staff were still reeling. You can say it twice. Keith seconded while their other companion was already unconscious after drinking himself into oblivion, and just like that he solved everything without any kind of struggle. Lean had been ordering food to their table non-stop. The poor girl had been the most distressed about the whole ordeal, and the guys were treating her to anything and everything she wished for the trouble. Luna, as a veteran, knew all too well what the girl had expected to go through to get the required help. And yet, Izuku had demanded nothing. Hey Luna. One of the waitresses called to the busty guild attendant, if you really want him to never leave, why don't you marry him? Luna turned a deep shade of red, and promptly began to sputter. She found the archdruid cute, true, but he was younger, and a druid. She, as a city girl, had no way to endure the kind of life the boy would surely lead. And the petite crimson demon had a way of glaring at other women, not to mention the slaves. The doors suddenly opening got everyone's attention. To be honest, it had been happening since Lean's party returned, with everyone expecting Izuku and company entering safe and sound. This time, it actually happened. Can you please stop it? Izuku asked as he entered the building, followed closely by quite a large entourage. I'm not a god, demigod or saint, I'm not even a hero yet. But what you did is nothing short of a divine miracle. Darkness shouted as she kept up with Izuku's pace, her eyes lit with sparkles. Not even an archpriest could do something remotely close to that. Since meeting him at the exit of the dungeon, and learning of what had happened, Darkness just couldn't stop her enthusiasm. Now Izuku was everything she wanted to follow. A man with a heart and soul so pure that he was the spitting image of an angel, a will so strong it bent the laws of magic, and a disposition so heavenly she was astonished he didn't have wings. She was willing to stop wishing he started abusing her if that meant having her saint to protect. Being a god, or even a demigod, Union muttered, as she had been doing though the entire trek to the guild hall, much to Izuku's increasing embarrassment, yes. That would explain his ludicrous power. Please, Izuku begged once more, just reaching his usual table, plopping down in hopes of finding some sort of respite. Stop. You have to admit that their point is hard to argue thanks to your tendency to overdo things. Megumin said with a smug grin on her face, sitting purposefully close to her boyfriend. Union had been showing increasing signs of interest in Izuku, to the point of Megumin catching her muttering something about taking him to the clan's village. She was still a noble among the clan, so it stood to reason that she would like to entice him into becoming the next clan leader, with everything implied by that. Megumin really didn't like that idea one bit. Be thankful you were allowed to walk from the city gates onward. Megumin finished, making Izuku shudder at the embarrassing memory. Liza had carried him like a princess since the moment it was decided they were going to walk to the city, and didn't allow him to stand on his own feet, until he ordered so with a firm voice, a few meters before the actual gates. It actually pained Izuku to know that the gator girl had been really sad after he gave the order. Although most didn't notice due to how her face didn't change at all, just her tail drooping a little bit being the only sign of her mood. Angel or just a man with a heart of gold, it doesn't change that we owe you for all eternity. Keel interjected, but didn't sit down with the group. My dear friend, what you kept from the small remnant of my treasure is just too little as a way of thanks. If you ever need help of any kind, do not hesitate to come to me. Most of Keel's immense treasure was gone, leaving him with little more than 200 million eris in gold, and some magic items and jewelry to his group's names. From this, Izuku only took the beak of a cockatrice as his payment, and only because Keel himself insisted on him taking something, even if only as a token of friendship. Thanks, but for now you should get used to your new life. Izuku replied with a warm smile, especially while taking a glance at Keel's linked hand with his beloved. You have a lot to live for now. Yes, of course. Keel replied with a smile that most would never see in a dark elf. We'll see you later, friend. Now we need to register to get our identification cards. With that, Keel and his group went to the counter, so they could properly start their new lives. At the counter, Lina had been visibly relieved to see Izuku in good health. The arrival of unknown people wasn't that big of a deal, even when they seemed friendly with the Archdruid. It was easy to imagine Izuku being kind to them, thus earning their friendship. "We would like to register," Keel politely requested, putting the best and gentlest smile he could muster. "After that, I would like to apprise and sell some magic items, before browsing through homes available for sale." "Of course," Luna replied, slightly taken aback by the smile of the Dark Elf. Everything seemed normal at first. Hundreds of years old. Elves live much longer. Already a necromancer. Necromancy may be illegal inside of towns and at hallowed ground, but the class was not. Besides, Dark Elf. The massive numbers on his stats could have brought attention, but since he was Izuku's friend, it seemed to fit. Then she looked at the name, "You're Keel the Lick." Luna's scream forced every adventurer to turn their heads to the counter. Izuku knew there could be issues, but hearing Luna's scream, in terror no less, was too much. As he and Megumin made their way to the counter to lend some aid, Union and Ila watched as a couple of priests hurriedly walked out of the building, with darkness darting after them immediately. "Former Lick, actually." Keel attempted to pacify the startled woman, finding little success. "I was waiting for a high-level priest to purify me, but instead I found a wonderful friend who was able to reincarnate me and my friends." "You mean, Izuku?" Luna asked, although the mere idea of successfully using reincarnation on an undead was so outlandish it couldn't be anyone else. "Does this mean your dungeon is safe?" One of Luna's worries was that, if Keel was a Lick, and real, it would mean that the dungeon would have to be quarantined until the main branch of the guild properly ranked its difficulty, meaning one less way to earn money and complete quests. With the Lick removed, and somehow convinced into becoming an adventurer himself, there would be no need of a quarantine, meaning that business would remain as usual, meaning that Izuku managed to provide a greater service to the city of beginners. The idea of seducing him was definitely becoming more appealing. "But of course, although it no longer is mine," Keel replied while hugging the beautiful high elf by his side. Curiously enough, she seemed to bask on the contact, instead of being bothered by it. "The place got cleaned, so you can rest assured there are no more undead there, or any need to delve into those ruins." Luna blinked in confusion. She had a bad feeling about that answer. "Well," Luna nervously continued as she handed the adventurer's card to Keel, "at least the respawning chests are still there." Keel's dungeon, with the respawning chests, was one of the selling points of the city as a place for beginners. She had to make sure whatever Keel had enchanted them with remained there. "What respawning chests?" Keel asked in honest confusion. Izuku had reached the counter by now, just in time to see Luna going ghostly pale. "The respawning chests of your dungeon." Luna was trying to remain calm, with no success at all. "Every year the chests would renew their treasure. It's the best feature of that dungeon. There is no way you can be Keel and not know about that." Keel looked even more confused, although he quickly recovered, as he finally pieced together what the woman was talking about. "Ah, right. The chests." Keel's words brought a sigh of relief to the busty attendant, just for his next words to deliver a fatal blow. "I had my minions fill them every now and then. I had to keep luring adventurers if I wanted to find a priest powerful enough to purify me." Izuku fasped. Magic, as an everyday feature of this world, made for an excellent explanation for any mysterious phenomena. People found that chests inside a dungeon replenished after some time. They immediately chalked it up to magic, never thinking that someone could manually do so instead. It was stupid, along with the alarming lack of common sense. "So," Luna's voice took a haunted tone, "the chests, they wouldn't be refilled. There is no need for me to lure any more adventurers there." Keel revealed, earning gasps from many adventurers that love to make a quick cash grab on the first floor of the dungeon. "So, I decided to take what little remains from my treasure, to enjoy this new life with my wife and friends. Hence why I asked for a home to purchase." Luna wanted to scream. One of the main appeals of the city was gone. Granted, there was still plenty to do around the city, and there was no shortage of quests. But the main reason for many to stay, one of the once steady sources of income, was gone. The priests were going to. "There they are." A sudden shout interrupted the conversation and registration process. "There is a foul necromancer. Arrest him." Everyone turned at the gates to see a group of priests, now accompanied by a group of guards. "Is it true, mister?" One of the guards, an old man that looked like a retired adventurer, asked as he took a firm step forward. "Are you really a necromancer?" "Yes, I am." Keel replied before the silence could become tense. "I'm pretty certain being one is not a crime though." The priests looked insulted by the remark. Izuku could tell that they were part of the heir's faith, as their iconography was quite obvious. "It isn't, sir." The guard quickly shot back, maintaining his authority, while conveying that he was just doing his job. "But you must understand that such a dangerous class makes other people nervous. Hence why I must request that you show me your adventure card, so I can make sure there are no crimes to your name." Keel happily complied, knowing very well that there was no way for him to have committed a crime. Izuku had made sure to purify his soul during his reincarnation, meaning that any past sin had been forgiven. However, most religious adventurers were rather quick to voice their opinion. Being a necromancer should be a crime by default. Even Aqua's followers wouldn't mingle with such unclean things. Ugh. The stench of undeath is so awful. Izuku really wanted to call out the stupidity of these people. Keel was never an evil person, as his motivation to rebel against the monarch of his era was born out of love. Even his minions were turned into undead by their own volition. He had to rein in his anger though. Just as being a necromancer was not a crime, voicing discomfort was also their right. Well, everything seems to be in order, mister. The guard took a long moment to read the name a couple of times. Keel. There was a moment of tense silence. That's like the name of the dungeon, the guard stated as he returned the card. He decided he wasn't being paid enough to prod any deeper. How coincidental. As the guard left the hall, still followed by a couple of priests demanding Keel to be put to the axe, Luna kept sinking in despair. Reporting this was going to be a nightmare. Isn't this a good thing? Izuku asked aloud, knowing well in his heart he didn't do anything wrong, that he just helped people in need. Now that there is no more danger of undead escaping the dungeon, and no need to pay the services of the church. This means that those resources can be directed elsewhere. Luna perked up at that. While the treasure chests were no longer a thing, the need to pay the church for maintaining the seals was gone too. The adventure lure would have to be replaced though. Maybe hunting snow sprites could become a thing, if Izuku could be convinced to join the hunt to deal with the winter shogun. How can that be a good thing, you idiot? One of the priests started to yell, surprising Izuku with how upset they sounded. How dare you take away from us our source of income? Izuku had forgotten that both churches were seeing this problem as a business. Milking money from the city for a job that should have been their sacred duty, not a protection racket. The guild should punish you for this travesty. Izuku had to nearly bite his tongue. He really wanted to yell back, to ask if he was supposed to let others suffer, so this corruption could continue unchecked. Then he remembered that a hero's job was to save people, not to make a conflict bigger. He'd save the adventurers, who were currently cowering down on their table, obviously wishing this attention didn't turn to them. He had stopped a powerful lick from making more undead minions, preventing a possible catastrophe on a city that was now making him look like a villain. He should be marked for this. A hero's reward came from knowing they did good, with fame and wealth being a mere second thought. We should lynch him. Izuku barely had time to react, grabbing Liza's hand to prevent her from murdering everyone in the hall. He really was thankful for her obedience, as he knew very well that he lacked the physical power to even slow her down. Chika still looked at him with an expression that was asking permission to sink her claws into the priests. Izuku didn't do anything wrong. Luna finally shouted, silencing everyone in the hall. His actions may have been outside a normal quest, outside the sanction of the guild, but he didn't break any laws, or harmed anyone. He saved a group of fellow adventurers, and even redeemed a once believed to be a powerful lick. He harmed our pockets. The lone priestess shouted at the back of the hall. I'm sure you'll soon find another way to demand our money. Luna replied with venom in her voice. The cold glare was well received by the young archdruid and his party. Even Ila found herself surprised at this action, for even Kayaya had to bend to the whims of the church, and barely, if ever, was backed by members of the guild to this degree. The adventurer Izuku and his party members will face no penalty from the adventurers guild. Luna said with finality. Then, she turned to look intently at the young druid. However, they will be advised to not act so rashly in the future. Quests are sanctioned for a reason, and jumping blindly into such situations could easily lead to more trouble than what they solve. Keel chuckled at this turnout. Happy to at least find one person with a modicum of common sense. Izuku smiled at the busty attendant, nodding in acceptance, and knowing in his heart that there was no way he would comply if people were in danger again. If you won't penalize his vandalism, the voice of an elderly man resounded, then we will do so. The gathered people parted ways to show the figure of an elderly man clad in ceremonial robes. I'm sorry. I tried to stop him, to explain. Darkness was now standing by Izuku's side. She looked utterly distressed. I'm sorry. For once, I agree with you, old geezer. A woman added. She was dressed in ceremonial robes too, but hers looked more exotic, fit more for the owner of a brothel, and not for a religious leader. Our poor followers are going to suffer now that we cannot get any money from maintaining the seals of that dungeon. How do you intend to make up for it? The goddess Aqua may be forgiving, but if you make her children suffer, you can expect justice to rain down upon your head. Izuku found it very hard to not let go of Liza's hand. He was looking at the leaders of the local churches of Eris and Aqua, and he really wanted to have a word with them. I pose. Darkness suddenly shouted, surprising Izuku, as he never expected her to go against her church. Izuku has not only done nothing wrong, none of his actions have gone against Eris's teachings. Darkness elaborated, unknowingly gaining a lot of appreciation from the green-haired teen. Nay. His actions are all our goddess would want each and every one of us to do. Upon opening her heart, Darkness found really hard to stop. While Izuku was the exact opposite of who she considered her soulmate, someone willing to indulge in carnal pleasures and give her all the pain and humiliation she so desired, he was the embodiment of what a saint was. Izuku is a kind-hearted man. Someone willing to help those in need, to heal the sick and the injured without seeking repayment. To protect the weak, to bring hope, even when no one asks him to do so. Darkness's voice had taken a tone that was just as serious as it was devoted. A man like him cannot be denounced as evil. A man like him deserves nothing short of being called a saint. Izuku found himself blushing really hard at all that praise, doubly so as Megumin lightly elbowed him while Chika nodded at him, making it clear she agreed with all the things being said. Unfortunately, the religious groups didn't seem to agree. And yet, he is nothing but a heathen. The elder man rebuked, contempt written on his features. How can he be a saint when he does not worship Eris? Nor does he worship our lovely goddess Qua? The woman added, showing a stare that told how little she thought of the druid before her. Perhaps he should tell us who he worships, then we could properly judge his actions then. Izuku may have zero knowledge about religion in this world, but he was no fool. These people were baiting him into escalating things, so they could find a way to turn him into some sort of villain. Not that he deemed their groups as worthy of staying in good terms with in the first place. No one. Izuku plainly replied, surprising everyone in the hall. I don't see the goddesses coming down to help the people in need, nor their followers portraying kind and caring goddesses to the masses. There were a lot of gasps. Most people found the words painful yet true. While Eris was portrayed as a benevolent goddess, her followers often showed strict procedures when delivering this kindness, leaving little but breadcrumbs for those who weren't part of the faith. The Axis cult was full of zealots and weirdos, so there was little to argue there. To treat the sealing of undead as a business, to basically ransom the survival of the civilians, is nothing but shameful greed. If this is what your goddesses teach as being good, then I want no part in your religion. Izuku explained, making a certain thief girl flinch at her table. Besides, I'm not a member of any of your churches, you cannot judge me. Of course we can judge you, silly boy. The woman replied, mockery filling her voice. The goddess Eris teaches us benevolence. So it falls upon me to dictate the price of your redemption. The elder man spoke, passing judgment. First, you have to properly deal with that filthy creature that follows you, making sure she can't fly in Eris's blessed sky. Second, you are to donate 1 million Eris to the church. Only then we'll open our services to you again. Until then, you can't enter our church, much less have your friends ask us to revive you. If the man wanted Izuku to feel pressure to comply, he failed miserably. Izuku found the requests idiotic, and the supposed reward underwhelming. He wasn't going to allow Chika to lose a single feather. She wasn't willing to give any time soon, much less hurting her in any way, shape or form. Eris surely is benevolent, no doubt the result of her church being well funded. The woman stated, not failing to show some envy in her voice. The Axis Church, however, feels the need to further punish this travesty, as our funding largely depended on keeping those seals working. So, we demand you part with 10 million Eris, and to grow one of those golden trees of our temple. Izuku did the only thing he could do at the moment, the only action fit for the situation. So, Izuku started, turning away from the zealots, and paying attention to more important people. How is the registry going, Keel? All the priests in the room gasped again at the scene, their importance being completely ignored. Then snores followed suit, as many adventurers found the scene amusing. They were worried, of course, as not having the backing of a church meant no revival if the worst happened. Then again, they were talking about fucking Izuku, the archdruid, slayer of Beldia, tamer of Gatorkin, and now, redeemer of Licks. Surprisingly well, my friend. Keel happily replied, not only showing his adventurer card, but motioning his followers to do the same. Despite the shock and distress, this professional lady surely knows how to keep working. Luna looked pale and conflicted. She obviously turned to auto mode to work, while her brain tried to deal with the horrendous situation unfolding before her. I got to be an alchemist, Sasha happily added. Izuku was happy for them, and that happiness gave him the required strength to keep Liza in check. Her scales had grown thicker, rougher. Her muscles, usually bulky and strong, had gotten steel-like. She was raging, and no one else had taken notice of the insanely dangerous situation. One of the younger priestesses decided that the druid had been rude enough, and a slap was in order. Her first step was promptly blocked by Darkness, who had taken her shield into a defensive position. Megumin gripped her staff, and Chika tensed, ready to jump and sink her talons into the first one to attack her beloved master. Ila was conflicted between jumping in to defend her party leader, and feign ignorance, and Union began to prepare the light of saber. There was no way she would miss a confrontation against the church. I'm looking for the archdruid, Izuku Midoriya. The voice, authoritative and feminine, suddenly filled the guild hall. It belonged to a beautiful woman clad in a blue official uniform and glasses. Her posture screamed official royal business, and the iconography she carried demanded respect. That's me, Izuku replied, tightening his grasp on Liza, who looked ready to start ripping off heads due to the amount of people insulting her master. Anything I can help you with? Internally, Izuku was screaming. Today had started good, even the sudden rescue mission ended up being more like meeting new friends. Then the city decided he was in the wrong for saving others. Now he was fighting the urge to just drop everything and live in the wilderness, with the added stress of the possibility of having to fight his way out. You have done enough already, the woman stated before she took a parchment out of her satchel, for the service of slaying Beldia, general of the Devil King's army, and protecting the lives of Axel's citizens. His Majesty has declared that you, and those who aided you in this heroic feat, are to be rewarded the full bounty for this enemy of mankind. 800 millionaires. Additionally, you are to be exempt for having to pay road tolls, so you may travel across the kingdom, free to continue your heroic crusade. There was a pregnant silence as the woman made a dramatic pause to allow one of her escorts to hand over a platinum plate to a bewildered Izuku, who felt a little guilty for thinking that there were only ungrateful morons governing the kingdom. It even took him some time to finally understand that the platinum plate was like a banknote for the bounty he just earned. The golden stick that accompanied it, the size of a school pencil, was actually the proof of his rite of passing. Izuku was at a loss. He had never been awarded anything in his life, and this felt like he expected to feel as if he had passed the UA entrance exam, one step closer to being a hero. Thank you. If you want to thank me and His Majesty, then continue to serve the kingdom. The woman replied, giving a small smile toward the archdruid, and staring at the hand he was using to keep the gator girl in check. If you can keep that brute calm, I'm sure that taking the heads of at least another 2 generals is within your capabilities. Izuku had to bite back a curse. He hated being reminded of how these idiots saw Chika and Liza as little more than animals, which was ironic considering they were more human, smart and wiser than the vast majority of the morons living in this world. With that being out of the way, the woman declared, making it obvious that Izuku was free to go. Luna, prepare the documentation for the closure of the temple to the goddess Aqua. What? Those belonging to the Axis cult shrieked at the news. Izuku was surprised too, but he decided that rewarding Liza for not killing anyone was more important now, just as hugging Megumin to find comfort, and petting Chika, because she had been truly supportive. For his part, Keel decided that he had heard enough talk about religion to last another 100 years, so he took his people to an unoccupied table and ordered food, a lot of it, as if to sate hundreds of years of hunger. House hunting could wait a few more hours, maybe even days. Lady Senna, is this alright? Luna was honestly confused. She saw the request for funding completed long enough ago for the tribute to reach the capital. They requested funding, and the request was completed. The capital treasury has yet to receive the 10 million heirs though. Senna coldly stated, surprising everyone in the room, although for reasons different from what the agent thought. We've already waited for 10 years, but if you have proof that the tax was sent already, I'll be willing to wait for confirmation. Murmurs and whispers quickly rose around the hall. Senna caught some of them, and was unsurprised to learn that the head priest had requested far more than was needed, or that the worshippers thought said head priest had sent the money already. Here is the document of the completed request. Luna showed the document, but the agent didn't even glance at it. Then, Senna spoke, her cold demeanor showing how she expected this to play out. Where is the tribute? We offered to keep it safe here, but the head priest insisted on keeping it inside the church, and deliver it himself. Luna knew very well how this was going to end, hence why she had prepared an ironclad defense. We also offered to transport the money and goods, but that was refused too. The head priest insisted that he himself, with the aid of a select group of crusaders, would carry out the delivery. Izuku didn't need a crystal ball to know what had happened. The head priest had run away with the money. He didn't find the strength to say told you so though. He was mentally tired, physically exhausted, and the idea of cuddling with Megumin and his girls was getting too strong to be ignored. He was sure they needed the cuddles too. I see, the guild is not at fault then. Senna replied with a cute voice, and then returned to her all-business mode. Start the paperwork. The sooner we get this done with, the better. As Luna began to fill out the reports and documentation required, the priests exploded in a myriad of voices. Those belonging to Eris openly mocked the misfortune of Aqua's followers, condemning them for having thieves leading them. The ones belonging to Aqua quickly began to plead for mercy. Senna didn't have any such thing in her heart though. Unless you show me the 10 million heirs owed, I'm closing the building by sunset. Senna stated, giving the cultists the cold shoulder. She had reasons to be this cold though, and not only because she worshipped Eris. The only man she ever wanted to marry had been tricked by a shameless harlot from that cult, forcing him to enter said cult and marry the girl or have his honor tainted forever. She had made her personal mission to see those psychos isolated from honest people who wanted to live normal lives. The cries for help didn't last long though. Hey, didn't that druid just receive a lot of money? Izuku wished to be able to teleport. He really didn't want to be in the middle of this fiasco. He was willing to even not demand his money back if he could get away right now. Master Izuku. The woman that had condemned him not 10 minutes ago made a complete shift, showing a cute smile and sparkles in her eyes. I know we started off on the wrong foot, but if Izuku almost let go of Liza's hand. His mind had suddenly told him that these people would be much more worthy as fertilizer than as humans. That Liza wouldn't be a villain by taking off the heads of what amounted to leeches. But his heart reminded him that he wanted to be a hero, and heroes saved lives, not took them away. That heroes only fought for peace, not for personal gain or for revenge. Darkness intervening helped him to not slip in his anger. Stop. Darkness demanded, stepping in the way of the archpriestess, blocking her path. Are you really going to demand money from him, after condemning him for doing what is right? Do you have no shame? Most would agree that Aka's followers didn't know shame, but then again, begging for money after talking so much shit was a new low. Darkness, Izuku called to the blonde crusader, earning everyone's attention. May I ask of you to deal with this? I'm tired of this stupidity, and I rather spend my time and money on those I love. That being said, join us at Wiz's shop after you finish with this. You also deserve some appreciation. Izuku gave a cute smile to the Crusader, who felt her heart skipping a beat. Maybe it wasn't too late for her. Of course, Izuku. Darkness replied in a rather dutiful way, really happy to be relied upon. I'll make sure to deal with these people in the proper way. With a final reassuring nod, Izuku, Megumin, Union, Liza and Shuka left the hall, leaving a confused ranger to aid a now imposing-looking Crusader. Lady Senna. Darkness called the agent in a very formal way, one that the woman recognized as being part of the nobility. Lady Dustiness Ford. Senna greeted back, well aware of how much this Crusader ridiculously outranked her. I would like to report the theft of 50 millionaires. Darkness stated, making Luna flinch. These people took this money from my party, and since they didn't use it for the purpose they stated, it is within my rights to demand reparations. The cause followers began to sweat, and Luna felt her heart starting to fail. The guild had a strict policy of sacrificing the attendants that were involved whenever nobles demanded reparations, which means that she was in a very real danger of not only losing her job, being forced into indented servitude to pay such outrageous amount of money. Then she remembered who she would be serving, and the dread decreased, dramatically so. Of course, Lady Dustiness Ford. Senna immediately agreed, a wicked smile adorning her features. It will be an honor to ensure that these thieves get proper punishment for taking from a noble, and for fooling the guild with their lies. As Luna sighed in relief, thanking the Earth Spirits for allowing her to keep her job, she began to think in ways to ask Izuku to stay in town. An endeavor that seemed impossible now, because the Church of Eris had decided to alienate who was the best adventurer this branch of the guild ever had. This is why you don't bite the hand that feeds you. Keel said to his followers, who admittedly felt angry at the idiots that verbally attacked who they considered to be a saint, or a god visiting their world. Magnus. This should be utterly unnecessary by now, but be ready for some incoming huge deviations from canon. Also, I was made aware that Kaya's followers now have official names, so be sure to check the new poll to decide what to do with these names. Omaki, a shattered dream for Henry B. Wiz, the shopkeeper, was a beautiful woman, and one of the greatest attractions of the city of Axel. Her beautiful body, kindness, and bubbly attitude made her quite popular with novice and veteran adventurers alike. Many teenagers would enter her shop for the sole purpose of ogling her, and lesser nobles liked to visit her, in order to find magic items fit to decorate their homes. She was a woman with secrets though. While everyone knew she was a klutz with no talent for business, only a select few knew she wasn't human. Those who knew this startling truth were either her friends, or had a lot of interest in keeping such a secret safe. This is not what we agreed upon. Wiz hissed at a full body-sized mirror. Why did you allow Beldia to attack the city? A lot of innocents could have died. The ornate mirror was not showing her reflection. It was pitch black, sans a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at her. Beldia acted on his own. The figure on the other side replied, lacking any level of concern, his actions alone do not break our contract. Wiz wanted to scream. She had joined the Devil King not because she believed his ways were better, or because she shared his ideals. She joined in order to prevent deaths. As long as she kept powering the barrier surrounding his castle, he would not kill innocents. Now she learned that words could be twisted, and that she had been too naive. Does this mean that as long as it's not your hand doing the killing, it is alright? Wiz asked through clenched teeth, allowing her temperament to show, a shadow of the ice witch of old. Is this what it means to honor a pact in your eyes? If she could, she would defect from the forces of the Devil King and be done with it. But her situation was unique. Her phylactery was hidden in a location known only to the Devil King, meaning that she had to comply until killed in the line of duty. If she died, she would just die with no returning, the phylactery would break, and that would be it. But if she quit, the Devil King would surely break the phylactery, which would mean that her soul would be forfeit, and the curse she shouldered would kill her former friends. She was trapped. So says you, who withheld information about such a dangerous adventure. The Devil King shot back, making Wiz flinch. Did you really thought I wouldn't learn about this insanely powerful archdruid? How he destroyed one of my best generals with ease? Or that you were aware of his existence long before this incident happened? Wiz started to break down. He was talking about Izuku. She knew he was special the day she met him, but that was because his eyes shone with kindness, and his soul resonated so preciously. She never thought he would be so proficient in battle, and perhaps she really forgot to mention later on that he was able to easily defeat who was previously reported as a potential hero. Now she hated herself even more. Because of her, Izuku was in the sights of the Devil King. Leave Izuku alone, Wiz hissed, fully returning to her frightening persona of the Ice Witch. Just as she still berated herself for her old party members being cursed all those years ago, she knew she would never forgive herself if Izuku was hurt because of her. A dark chuckle echoed inside the shop. The Devil King seemed thoroughly amused. A powerful spellcaster, who is an enemy of the goddesses, and loves demi-humans, the Devil King had switched to a rather jolly attitude. Oh my, perhaps I should invite him for a cup of tea, and maybe offer him my own daughter. Wiz had had enough. She didn't know if the Devil King was serious, or if he was just messing with her, but she knew that her previous sacrifice had been in vain. I'm done dealing with you. Crash. Without a second thought, she broke the mirror, the artifact that connected her to the Devil King. If she weren't an undead, she would be shedding tears of grief. She couldn't betray the Devil King, at least not directly. Her only hope was to offer her life to Izuku, for if he killed her, the barrier would weaken, and her friends would be safe. Wiz. Izuku's voice filled the room as he entered the shop. Eyes full of determination, full of worry for her. Now the clumsy shopkeeper needed to find the courage and the proper time to reveal the truth to her precious friend. The taste of freedom. Wiz, the shopkeeper knew for a fact that the archdruid Izuku Midoriya was different. Different from other adventurers, from other druids, even from most humans. He carried a family name, but claimed no nobility title. He demonstrated the bearings of a vastly superior education, and yet behaved in a glaringly humble way. Izuku Midoriya was full of contradictions. Are you sure? Union stuttered as she clung to the item in her hands. Can I really have this? The two crimson demons had been arguing over said item, a magic wand with the tip holding a heart-shaped magicite gem, for over 20 minutes now. Oddly enough, the argument was centered on the proper poses to make when brandishing it, and not even once touching the fact that it looked like something a little girl would use. Of course. Izuku promptly replied, flashing the cute smile he was known for. You are part of the team, and you've been helpful. Why wouldn't you deserve a reward? I am part of a team. Union's eyes began to water upon finally hearing the words her heart desired for so long. I'm part of a team. Megumin just sighed at the scene. Izuku meant well, and Union wasn't an actual hindrance, but the fact remained unchanged that her boyfriend was weak to girls in need of being rescued, whether it be physically or emotionally. It wasn't a bad thing though, but such gallant disposition would surely cause a lot of problems along the way. Izuku was quick to catch the cute little sound, and even quicker to react to it. And for you, I want, Izuku dragged on in order to catch the attention of his girlfriend, finding success without trouble, a new set of clothes. Megumin blinked. What's wrong with my clothes? Megumin asked in honest confusion. She was certain that they were revealing enough to keep Izuku's attention. I thought you liked them. The last bit was said in a lower tone with a shy attitude. She wondered if he wanted something more daring, like something a sorceress would use, like a battle bikini. Of course I like you. I like you the way you are, the way you look, Izuku started, blushing all the way, but you are growing, and your clothes aren't. In the background, Wiz let out a small chuckle. Megumin, with her tiny body, looked adorable in her normal outfit, as the combination of a rather small skirt and enormous hat made her look all the more eye-catching. However, Izuku was right, and her body would soon grow to the point of her outfit scratching indecency. The skirt eventually becoming too short to protect her modesty, and her chest no doubt would find the cloth too restraining. Just looking at the other Crimson Demon was proof enough of how beautiful she would become one day, all thanks to a steady supply of food and shelter. If that's the case, Union called to their attention. Why don't we, go back to the village? How many times do I have to explain that he is my boyfriend? Megumin instantly shifted into a defensive stance, practically shielding the now flustered archdruid with her tiny frame. Stop trying to seduce him. As the flustered girl descended into a flurry of denials, Wiz continued to watch. Her heart and mind at war with each other, trying to find the right moment and the words required to ask her selfish request, and how to ask forgiveness for her disastrous blunder. We are ready to make a purchase. Izuku's voice brought back the ditzy shopkeeper from her troubled thoughts. We also want to commission some new clothes. Looking at the items before her, Wiz noticed that it was the girly wand and an assortment of accessories, all gifts for the girls that were fighting for his heart. The situation made her envious, especially because Izuku was sinfully kind and caring. Wouldn't it be better if you commissioned this with a seamstress? Wiz asked in honest confusion. I can make these pieces of clothing if you really want, but it will be more expensive. The clothes in question were a couple of small chest pieces made of cloth with a small support made of thin metal placed below the breasts. She couldn't understand the function of the piece, but it wasn't armor. I'd rather you be the one to create it. Izuku replied with a kind smile. Then I want you to take credit for these clothes, and sell them to all the women you can. Izuku, being an only child, and growing without a father for most of his life, was forced to know and understand the function of bras. It was a truly embarrassing fact, but the women of this world really needed such a thing. He decided to allow Wiz to take credit for the invention, rather than carry the stigma himself, of course. And of course, the very first models were aimed for Megumin, Chika, Darkness, Liza and Union. Why? Wiz asked, baffled at the selfless offer. Izuku Midoriya was kind, caring and generous. Things that were hard to come by, especially together. It made a request all the harder to make. Because we are friends, Izuku started before he seemed to grow hesitant for a moment. Also, you seem to be depressed, and I want you to cheer up. Behind the archdruid, two crimson demons stood in awe. One shook her head in disbelief at the situation, the other just face-palmed, not in annoyance, but in an attempt to stifle a chuckle. No one, anywhere, would renounce the rights to an invention, no matter how silly or useless it may be. And Izuku was giving away something functional just to get a smile. If we are really friends, Wiz started, knowing very well that if she didn't capitalize on the offering, she may never be able to come up with the courage to ask for what she really needed. Can I ask for something really selfish? Izuku knew that something was up, but he had no idea what. Wiz was easy to read, especially when something bothered her. Her ditzy attitude was her way of enjoying life in a carefree way, to tell her worries to go away. Seeing her so focused, and yet so absent. No cuddles or feathers. Chika interrupted the moment, using Liza as a shield. Only Master can have anything Chika related. That spontaneous demand made Wiz chuckle. No, it's not that. Wiz replied, finally smiling. I need you to listen to an old tale, and then listen to my request. I promise that I'll reward you with something nice. For the next hour, Izuku and company were treated to the tales of the legendary Ice Witch. How she traveled the kingdom with her party while tackling impossible odds, and how they earned their status as powerful and courageous adventurers. Then came the tale of their downfall, how their egos got the better of them, or rather, their over-reliance on the fabled Ice Witch. In an attempt to boost their fame and glory, and the gold in their pockets, they had targeted Belita. The battle lasted for nearly 2 days, devolving into a duel between the mighty Dullahan and the relentless Ice Witch. It had been, according to Wiz, a simple slip of her mind. Caught in the rhythm of their deadly dance, the Dullahan had positioned himself in the perfect spot, shooting his deadly curse at the Ice Witch. He didn't expect to hit her, but the people behind her, people she had forgotten were there during her adrenaline-fueled combat trance. She evaded easily, and her party members had paid the price. Eldia, as expected, left the party to suffer for their shortcomings, warning them about the time limit before their final day, and how they were going to suffer, unless they could defeat him. It didn't even take 3 days for the Ice Witch to find a way to save her friends. Defeating Beldia alone was a no-go. She could stand against him on equal grounds, but without a powerful priest at hand, there would not be a killing blow. Instead, she sought another Devil King's general, the fearsome Duke of Hell, Banner. They battled for an entire day, with the witch coming out on top at the end. With her victory, she demanded the Duke of Hell to help her in saving her friends. In the end, it meant shouldering the curse herself in their place. Banner, of course, could do it, but he had warned her that her soul would not be able to shoulder such stress, meaning that she would die, and the curse would be back on the original targets, barely buying a day or 2 more to live in agony. Seeing her despair, the Duke offered an alternative. By becoming something more resilient than a human, she could shoulder the curse without dying, thus saving her friends, as long as she kept shouldering the curse. That day, the Ice Witch abandoned her humanity, and shouldered the curse of her party members. That day the Ice Witch disappeared, never to be seen again. Was the Ice Witch. Wiz finished her tale, sadness mixed with liberation in her features. I'm Malik now, and a general of the Devil King's army. I mostly just help maintain the barrier protecting his castle though. Taking a moment to see the faces of her audience, Wiz noticed that the looks she was being given were sympathetic. There was a surprising lack of rejection, no cries of outrage, or even incredulous looks. She could say they looked ready to help her. That's why Wiz hesitated. She knew this had to be done, that there was no other way around the problem. The request, what I need you to. Wiz, Izuku interrupted the troubled shopkeeper, a kind and caring face illuminating the entire shop. Do you want to reincarnate? It had come out of nowhere. An offer so outlandish that it couldn't be true. Of course, an archdruid could learn reincarnation, but to use it on an undead. Then again, this was Izuku, the wonderful adventurer who couldn't care less about impossibilities. If he was offering, then it was a real possibility. Bonk. Seeing the young archdruid getting hit in the head by an angry petite crimson demon was another outlandish thing. Although it was clear that the hit wasn't aimed to hurt. Stop it. Megumin shouted, still holding her staff at the ready. What? Izuku asked in surprise, while holding his head in a defensive way. Why? You already collapsed today while reincarnating one ancient lick. Megumin stated, glaring at her boyfriend with worry. I won't have you collapse again. Wiz was more than just surprised by such a declaration. On one hand, this reckless behavior couldn't be right. Exhausting one's mana to the point of collapse was taxing to the body, as exemplified by the underdeveloped Megumin, who not too long ago couldn't go a day without using explosion magic and collapsing. On the other hand, this revelation meant she had a way out of her deal with the Devil King. Reincarnation worked differently than resurrection, as the first spell threw the soul into its natural cycle of rebirth, meaning that all past sins and curses would be erased for a fresh start, while the second only returned the soul to the body, therefore lingering effects like curses would remain. Chika agrees with Megumin. Chika was quick to join in, taking the petite girl's side. Master needs to rest and recover. With speed and agility that the young archdruid simply couldn't follow, he found his staff snatched away from his hands by a padding black harpy. He idly wondered if the petite avian girl didn't use some sort of illusion too. Master, rest, Liza added as she hugged Izuku from behind. It was a holding maneuver full of care and love, but Izuku could still say it felt as if he was being held by an industrial press. He could also tell that her sizable breasts hadn't shrunk in the slightest. Izuku's squeal was a rather cute mix of embarrassment and surprise. I get it. Even when he gave in, Liza refused to let him go, much to the increasing embarrassment of the party leader. Then Darkness and Ila entered the shop, getting a fantastic view of the now blushing Izuku. "What's going on?" Ila asked, failing to conceal her curiosity. Izuku was going to recklessly use his super spells again. Union reported, barely able to emerge from her dazzled condition. "I have to side with Megumin on this. Izuku needs to properly rest for a day or two before attempting that spell again." Ila was actually surprised about Izuku not struggling against his slave. Such a scene should be impossible due to slaves being bound by the brand, making them unable to disobey or go against their master. However, that curiosity was overridden by the declaration. "What?" Ila had no idea what they were talking about. "What spell?" "Izuku, you need to rest before pulling any more stunts." Darkness interrupted, truly worried about the saint under her care. "Miracles are tremendously taxing. You need to make sure you are always well rested before attempting any." But Izuku weakly tried to argue, but Liza continued to smother him with love and worry, making it hard for the young archdruid to focus on anything besides calming his hormonal impulses. "Why does she have to be so beautiful and bountiful?" "It is fine," Wiz all but shouted, finally understanding that Izuku wanted to sacrifice his health for her. "I'm not going anywhere. I can wait for as long as needed." That declaration brought everyone's attention back to her. Wiz didn't know how many would learn her secret in the meantime, but her life wasn't worth risking in exchange for her dear friend. If a party of heroes came in to slay her, she wouldn't mind as long as Izuku was safe. Would that be enough to keep Izuku still? Darkness asked all of a sudden. She loved Izuku's heavenly disposition, but he was reckless when it came to helping people. Can we trust him to not do anything until fully recovered? One look at Izuku was enough. It was obvious that he would sneak his way out to help someone in need. "I can keep his staff while he rests," Wiz offered, knowing that such a powerful spell needed a focus to even be able to cast it. "Let's go for that," Union replied, immediately wincing as she realized she may have overstepped her rank in the party. "Agreed." Chika agrees. "Good plan. What are we agreeing on again?" Ila couldn't help but ask. Understanding her new party members was becoming increasingly difficult. "Don't I have the right to object?" Izuku asked, annoyed at this development, but finding himself unable to struggle, or even order Liza to let him go. "No?" Liza's answer made it obvious that her desire for his well-being was overriding her ingrained obedience. As the party continued to browse her items, Wiz contemplated the path before her. Izuku had become her friend easily and quickly, but she didn't understand why. It wasn't infatuation, as the young druid had yet to properly ogle her, make an improper remark, or even try to feel her up during her many approaches. It wasn't greed, as she hadn't been asked, not even once, to lower her prices, or to bring up the large collection of forbidden items she hoarded. In fact, most of the time the young druid only bought lesser magic items and trinkets, to make his party members smile. Waving goodbye as the group left after purchasing some chameleon cloaks and a few silk cushions, Wiz continued to wonder how to proceed forward. If Izuku's reincarnation worked, the curse would be undone and she'd be free. Free to return to a life of adventuring. Maybe finally be able to find a proper romance. Looking down at her desk, the troubled look decided that pondering the future would do her no good. Instead, she focused on what she had in front of her right now. Izuku's staff was a thing of beauty. As primal as it looked, it had a perfect grip, balance, and perhaps the most beautiful resonance she had ever felt on a spell focus, but it hardly could be used as a weapon. At the side of the staff, there was the beak of a cockatrice. Without the cockatrice's stone gall, it had no petrification potential, but it still held a powerful paralyzing venom perpetually attached to the edge of the beak. Maybe I should upgrade his staff, Wiz muttered to herself as she held both items. Then a cute smile adorned her features, as she imagined how Izuku would react to the upgrade. It would be a nice thank you gift, even if only for the thought of helping me. Having no need to sleep or eat, the ditzy shopkeeper began to work on the upgrade, while taking adequate breaks to touch the beautiful jet black feathers adorning the staff. The next day, deep into the forest, quests were the daily source of income for adventurers. They came in a variety of shapes and grades of difficulty, ranging from the boring gathering duty to the ever-exciting monster subjugations. However, they all shared one thing in common. It was always impossible to determine the danger involved. Ruin. Why? Why now? Why yes? Not like this. The group of adventurers found themselves running for their lives. What started as a simple goblin extermination had turned into a massive fuck-up. Ruire. A large feline leapt at them from the bushes, missing one of the adventurers by the skin of their teeth. Why is there a rookie killer here? Dust and his party never imagined that a rookie killer, a feline beast that resembled a black saber-tooth, would be lurking so close to the town of beginners. Then again, the beast was known for hiding away from strong adventurers, and lure low-level ones with weak prey. The lack of reports would be obvious due to the exceedingly low chance of surviving an encounter with one. "Keith," Taylor called while trying his best to not fall behind due to the weight of his gear, "shoot it with your bow." "Sure thing," Keith replied without stopping, or even looking back, "after you stop it for 1 second. Dust's party was not the weakest, but it was not above novice rank either. Facing off against a rookie killer was suicidal at best. "Ah!" Lin yelled as she twisted her ankle, falling to the ground with a face that reflected her panic. She hadn't hit the ground, and she could already feel the beast breathing down her neck. Dying by being torn to pieces by this monster was a horrible way to go, doubly so with the knowledge that her party didn't have enough money to pay for a proper resurrection spell. Lin thus screamed as he did the unthinkable. The pervert stopped dead in his tracks, and jumped to shield the girl with his body. They weren't an official couple yet. They just fooled around with the idea of being an item to go on a date or two before committing. And yet, something inside the blonde forced him to act like a man, even if it was for the last seconds of his life. And the loud sound was followed by the whining of an animal. Seizing the opportunity, Lin and thus looked toward the rookie killer, and saw it rolling on the ground with a crossbow bolt sticking out of one of its legs. Protect the adventurers. The commanding voice held a cute tone, which made them recognize the owner well before his form came into view. Izuku the archdruid, somehow, had come to their rescue, again. It may be shameful, but they were truly grateful for this timely rescue. On it, darkness jumped out of nowhere, lifting her thorny shield to protect the downed couple, thorny mace at the ready. What the heck is that? Keith couldn't help but ask as he looked at the one who managed to shoot the rookie killer. Ila the ranger, unintended slave of the archdruid, was holding an artifact that the archer had trouble calling a crossbow. In the delicate hands of the pink-haired girl rested a contraption that looked more like an elongated box with trigger on one end, a tiny metal bow on the other, and a small barrel in the middle of the box. It was, of course, more complex than that. The cord of the bow ran inside the box through a slit. Below the tiny bow was a secondary handle with what appeared to be another trigger. On one side of the box, a third small handle could be seen. And at the top of the box, there was a spyglass attached. It looked too complex to be a crossbow, but it seemed to function like one. Reloading, Ila shouted. It was the normal thing to do, and it was to be expected that the girl would seek cover while struggling to pull the cord back and replace the bolt. The ranger began by relaxing the grip on the secondary handle, causing the arms of the bow to move back and release all tension from the cord. Then, with barely any effort, she pulled the third handle back, which moved the cord back into position, which was signaled by a rather discreet clicking sound. After that action was finished, she rotated the barrel below, which made more clicking sounds, revealing that another bolt was now set into a ready position, thanks to its tip now being visible at the end of the box. Then she returned to applying pressure to the secondary handle, which forced the arms of the bow to move and tense again. Finally, she moved the artifact so she could see through the spyglass. Ready? Ila shouted after not even 10 seconds. And as the beast made to roar in defiance, the ranger shot, scoring a hit right inside the mouth of the beast, piercing right through its brain. The party of adventurers looked on with incredulity. Kaya's cheerleader had soloed the rookie killer in just 2 shots. Are you alright? Izuku asked the group, his sincere worry soothing the hearts and nerves of the battered adventurers. Is anyone injured? The sheer impact of seeing someone so useless act like a badass hero was soon replaced with acceptance. It was Izuku's party, after all. I think I twisted my ankle, Lin replied, seemingly ignoring that dust was still hugging her. If he was doing so out of worry, or out of fear, it was difficult to say. Let me help you, Izuku said as he went to place his hands onto the injured limb. Cure wounds, Izuku intoned. Emerald light shone upon the ankle, and almost instantly the pain was gone. Cure wounds was a basic healing spell, common among all priests, and not uncommon in the hands of druids and other divine casters. The surprise that those watching felt, thus, came from the fact that it came out with a greater potency than what priests would use, and the light was far more intense than what was seen at the different temples. The fact that it wasn't white was also of note. Lin was hesitating to talk. The feat may be irrelevant, but it was still yet another oddity to crown the young archdruid with. Thank you. Lin had confessed to finding Izuku intimidating. Too much power, too many unique skills, so much more capable, that she couldn't even begin to imagine the hurdles of the girls following him. Just what kind of acts of devotion did they need to perform to gain his attention? Thus had never been so grateful in his life for small misunderstandings. Seeing the green-haired boy drunk once had been more than enough to understand that he was still human, and thus, relatable. Glad to hear it. Izuku finished, turning around to address his party members. Well, how was it? The quest was about collecting healing herbs. It was simple, easy and quick. Finding that the custom crossbow was ready just added the intention to find some moving targets for a field test. Izuku had no way to know how big of a deal this particular target was, or the fame that the pink-haired ranger would incur because of what she did. Ila drawled on as she began to look at every part of her new experimental weapon. Heavy. But I can manage. Bianca. That was the name that Mr. Talonov gave to his creation. The complex mechanism that used heavy-duty springs and gears filled the boxy casing of the crossbow, the hell-malted mithril, making for a powerful alloy for most of the pieces, while the iron bark formed a not-so-heavy casing. The weapon was not easy to operate, as it required high coordination to quickly load the next shot, but it required far less strength when compared to other crossbows. When Talonov asked for a new name for this type of weapon, Izuku blurted the name, bowgun. What is that thing? Keith asked as he approached the ranger, who immediately hugged the bowgun while taking a step back. And where do I get one? Back at the guild hall, Izuku was kind of used to the intense staring every time he entered the guild. If it wasn't after saving someone, it was simply because he was surrounded by loving girls. Said girls, of course, were talented and strong, and not merely accessories to show off. Today, though, the intense staring was not directed at him. Can you please stop shielding your weapon like it's some sort of baby? Megumin asked to the nervous ranger. It's rather disturbing. Leela just reinforced her grip on Bianca. Apparently, Dust's party had begun to spread the news of the bowgun, and how powerful it had been against the rookie killer. There were actual eyes full of envy, animosity, and greed directed at the ranger right now. And she was well aware of them. She failed to notice the fear though. I can understand her. Darkness joined the banter as they walked to their table. Every day I get offers for the weapons Izuku made for me, but I'll never let go of them. There was a healthy amount of fear coming from the stairs. The feat of killing a rookie killer in 2 shots was the equivalent of saying that she could kill 24 adventurers, just like how dangerous Darkness looked, due to her being able to stand her ground against Beldia. The greed and envy were there, but so was the survival instinct telling them all that attempting anything would end in instant death. I think Megumin is jealous. Union's statement earned a loud gasp from the petite crimson demon. She doesn't have a custom item, while others do. The idea of teasing Megumin brought shivers to anyone who was aware of the existence of Big Bang. Seeing the small archwizard tremble in anger only made things scarier. Is that true? Izuku asked with a warm smile, earning a cute pout from his girlfriend. Should I make something special for you? Maybe a staff. That question earned a reaction from the explosive girl. You mean it? Megumin asked with sparkles in her eyes, earning a resolute nod from her boyfriend. Can it have that iron bark you grow? And a lock of your hair too? Unknown to Izuku, Megumin was asking for a tradition between lovers. It was believed that exchanging locks of hair would protect each other from ill intent. And for spellcasters, this meant a more potent focus. Well, Izuku playfully drawled for a second. If I can have a lock of your hair. Megumin nodded as they finally sat at their table. It didn't take long for her to snuggle up to Izuku. A lock of master's hair, Chika muttered, imagining having a bracelet or a ring, or even a pendant with such a treasure. I want only master. Liza was much simpler on her thinking. Thud. And then she finally placed the other thing down. The thing that had nearly every adventurer drowning in awe and fear. It was the corpse of the rookie killer. To be honest, Liza would have preferred to tear it to pieces for easier transportation. But Izuku had requested to have it intact, as he had an idea for the materials. I'll see what I can do to please you all. Izuku replied with a well-natured chuckle, completely failing to notice the stares of those who misinterpreted his wording. But for now, we need to make a revision for Iola's debt. In her seat, said Ranger winced. Situations like hers required regular revisions to ensure that the debt was being paid in a proper manner. It also guaranteed that the one paying didn't try to steal or cheat their way around. For Iola, this was an obvious move, something that was long overdue, even if her time in this party had been rather short. She had been given a room at the inn, even if it was a small one. She had been having 3 meals a day, new clothes, and now, what amounted to a legendary weapon of her own. If the debt were to increase by another 20 million, she would still call it fair. Well, the ranger made a mental list of all the benefits she had enjoyed, and failing to suppress the need for a comparison with her time with Kayaya, Luna had arrived at their table, with a few papers in hand. Here is the balance. Luna stated as she placed the papers on the table. Please check that there are no errors or discrepancies. Luna had a knowing smile adorning her face. It had all played out like Izuku wanted without a doubt. Taking her time to read through the 3 pages that corresponded to her, the ranger couldn't help the gasp that escaped her. It was impossible. There was no way the numbers were right. Is this? Iola couldn't help but read it again, unable to believe her eyes. For real. Tears were now rolling down her cheeks. What was in the papers was in no way correct. There was not a single person in this world that had the heart to do this. That's right. Izuku said with a triumphant smile. Congratulations on earning your freedom. The words of the young archdruid were followed by soft applause. It was a momentous occasion, but for the rest of the party members, this seemed like the most Izuku thing to happen. How? Iola weakly asked, wondering if she was just about to wake up to a crueler reality. Why? The tears were getting more numerous, so Izuku thought about explaining a little bit. Well, you were already part of the party when Belida attacked, so technically you were part of the party that defeated Beldia. Izuku's words made absolutely no sense. It was, after all, common sense to exclude the weaker members from rewards, right? So, technically, a part of the reward is yours. It was a small portion due to your small participation. Darkness clarified, acting as bait is not enough for an equal share. The words of the noble-born were a poor attempt to lessen the impact. The ranger didn't deserve any of that money. In fact, she was the reason why Izuku had to fight back then. You've also been helping us with all the quests we were taking. Izuku continued, making even less sense, as her participation was that of target practice while adventuring. Every little bit of help matters. Iola stared crying. She didn't deserve this. Izuku, the man she hated at the beginning, was showing her kindness in a measure that was unthinkable. Instead of taking advantage of her like anyone else would have done, Izuku had helped her in every aspect he could. He polished her skills, letting her understand that everything she could do was helpful. He helped her regain her dignity, as giving her sensible clothes made her more respectable in the eyes of the guild and the other adventurers. He made her strong, as what she did today wouldn't be but an unreachable dream for her old self. And now, how's all that enough to pay my debt? Leela asked, her mind still finding it difficult to believe that the one to fight for her freedom was the guy who she thought had taken it away in the first place. Here it says that I'm getting money for myself. She wasn't being kicked out. That much she understood. But to be given money when not too long ago she seemed to have endless debt. Wasn't this too much kindness for just a party member? Was he trying to also win her heart? You've earned it. Izuku replied, being followed by the rest of the party nodding in agreement. You also need to learn how to spend your money. Leela had been prone to always let others do the important stuff. When she was with Kayaya, he would do the fighting and all the guild-related matters. Izuku had been given that last role too. In fact, why don't you talk with Luna about your last kill? Izuku added, getting a startled look from the ranger. You need to learn how to negotiate for the parts, or decide if you want to keep them to commission an item for yourself. You could totally keep the pelt of the monster and commission a cloak. Union suddenly interrupted, years of solitude dulling her social sense and timing skills. It would be adorable to turn the head into a hood. While Megumin face-palmed, either because of the untimely interruption or her odd fashion sense, Izuku limited himself to giving her some head pats. She may not have been a demi-human, but she purred all the same, much to Megumin's annoyance. Come with me, Leela. Lina called as she extended a hand towards the overwhelmed ranger. Let's talk business at the counter. As soon as the pair were out of hearing range, Izuku made a serious face. It was time to discuss something important. Now that that is done, we need to get ready. Izuku proclaimed, getting resolute nods from his party members. We'll be able to pick up the carriage in 3 days. Food and water are no problem, but turning to look at the masochistic crusader, they found the blonde smiling. Don't worry. Darkness replied without hesitation, I'm sure my father will not object to the journey. While Izuku, Megumin and Union could freely move around the world, Darkness had strong ties to the city. Traveling between cities was not an actual problem, but the journey Izuku intended required a degree of dedication that a noble-born couldn't just give. She wasn't just bound to not return to her family anytime soon, she was also liable to never return at all. Chika will forever follow master. The harpy said in a low tone, one which Izuku was now comfortable with. I follow. Liza voiced her loyalty and determination, much to Izuku's happiness. We'll defeat the Devil King, together. Megumin was quick to strike a heroic pose, making Izuku smile while remembering the first time he met her. Yes, together. Union posed by the petite girl's side, because we are a team. Don't you have to ask your father for permission? Megumin instantly broke character, now poking at the side of the now flustered girl. Did you even ask permission to be here to begin with? Megumin. Union was now trying to shield her sides from Megumin's fingers. It doesn't work like that. Don't give the wrong idea to Izuku. Izuku couldn't help the laugh that escaped his lips. He loved these girls, his teammates. He couldn't help but reinforce the self-promise he made to never allow his precious people to get hurt. The path to return home was about to finally begin, and he needed to make sure he was prepared to ensure not only victory, but a safe return for the people he loves. Magnus. Slowly but surely, we are moving forward with the story. Don't expect it to go like canon. Omake emergency meeting for all about then. Inside the Adventurers Guild, in one of the private rooms, a group of people were holed up, trying desperately to find a solution for their current crisis. And that is the situation. Luna reported to the crystal ball sitting atop the table, those around her showing faces of utter distress, that dwarves couldn't be stalled, and I'm afraid the churches did a tremendous job at alienating him. Izuku Midoriya, the archdruid who had completed more quests on his short time as an adventurer than many veterans in a lifetime of hard work. The same adventurer who defeated a general of the Devil King's army, bringing great fame to the city, and to this branch of the guild. The same cute boy that had been recognized by the king, and who was basically bullied by the churches of Eris and Aqua. And that wasn't even taking into account the attempted assassination by the Linden College upon his teammate. I understand, the elderly voice that came out of the crystal ball belonged to the Grandmaster of the guild. An elderly man who was diligent and hardworking, if a little bit of a pervert too, losing him to the war, or worse still, to another city or kingdom, would be catastrophic. Is there anything he is weak to? Alcohol. Women. Men. There were groans of annoyance at the antics of the Grandmaster, although he had a bit of a point. A few promising adventurers had been tied to the town thanks to their proclivities, but Izuku was a special case. That is unlikely to work. Maria, another of the attendants, and a beautiful elf, spoke. He already has a sizable harem following him. 2 crimson demons, 2 demi-humans, and 2 nobles. Startled stares fell on the elven attendant, who sighed in exasperation. Lady Lalatina Darkness Dustiness Ford and Fioila Bellaflor. Maria elaborated, the daughter of the duke, and the daughter of a lesser noble. There is literally nothing else we can throw at him to make him stay, at least in that regard. In his seat, one of the male attendants, the accountant to be precise, began to take notes. The archdruid seemed to have everything on his harem at first glance, but closer inspection revealed that he still lacked pieces for his collection. In the Crimson Demons he had a lowly and a younger sister type. In the slaves he had a brood and a pet. The nobles provided an older sister and its son deer. He still lacked a crew deer, the lewd bitch and the daughter types. Right? Luna was quick to shout, forcing the man's mind to return to the present. He requested land to own. Murmurs quickly rose. Owning land was reserved for nobility, which the young druid was not. Then again, through being recognized by the king, a case could be made about the boy being basically knighted. It was a stretch, of course. Nobles would complain, that was a given. But if the ruling lord could be convinced to give away one parcel of land, even a bad one, Izuku could be convinced to call this town his home. Excellent. The Grandmaster joined the discussion, start sending letters to the lord. I'll try to contact his majesty to ensure cooperation. We only have a couple of days to convince Izuku to become a permanent resident. In his seat, the accountant couldn't help but see the glaring holes in the desperate plan. He could only think of 2 places that the local lord would be willing to sell, both too small for a druid to create a comfortable grove, and the lord wouldn't accept less than a king's ransom for them, and even then, he would make it clear that he'd be in a position to reclaim the lands on a whim. His idea was more promising. He just had to contact us to have him go to the Cream Cafe to request a special service for the young druid. That would confirm what kind of bait was needed to ensnare Izuku Midoriya for good. If everything fails. Maria spoke once more, earning some attention at her grim tone. I vote for Luna marrying him. That idea made Luna blush and sputter for hours. Then her blush deepened when she was asked why she didn't make a comeback about Maria being the one to marry the young boy. That lack of argument also gave more ideas to the perverted accountant. Purity. Atop the roofs of the city of Axel, quite close to the Adventurers Guild, one petite and feminine figure was flying. Small in stature, small in feminine assets, sporting a face that screamed innocence, she still exuded a remarkably lewd aura. Most males, especially hormonal teenagers, would no doubt approach her with impure intentions if they saw her. My first mission. The girl muttered in excitement, stars sparkling in her eyes at the prospect of success. I'll finally become a fully fledged succubus. If anyone tried to sexually assault her, it would be their downfall. Because she was a succubus. Succubi are terrifying demons not because they were strong or magically gifted, but because they knew really well how to worm their way into the hearts of men. Capable of turning steadfast friends and brothers against each other with a wink and a blown kiss, capable of turning the most devout priest into a lustful beast with a single caress, they're ranked amongst the most dangerous species of demons known to man. Here it is, the inn marked in the request. The little succubus muttered to herself while glancing between the note in her hand and the building before her. Now, time to find the little archdruid. All churches had decreed that any Succubi were to be killed on sight, and should a coven's location be suspected, the entire town was razed to the ground, in order to cleanse the land of their influence. But in Axel, such a decree was ignored on purpose. There he is. The small girl couldn't hold her surprise at seeing that her target wasn't alone. Oh my. He already has quite the entourage. And he sleeps with all of them at the same time. The Cream Cafe was an establishment hidden from the main road, but quite well known among adventurers and many normal workers. It was unique because it was fully operated by Succubi. And it offered quite a unique service. They provided exceedingly pleasant dreams, vivid to a fault too, in exchange for the excess life essence of the client. Succubi fed on life essence, which they could either take all at once, resulting in the target's death, or just tiny bits at a time, ensuring that one target could be milked for quite a long time. This could only be achieved by a lone succubus targeting half a dozen males. Axel, however, was known as a city full of perverts, full of pent-up adventurers in dire need of sexual relief. The leader of the coven had found that in such a place with such a high demand of relief, regulating her coven to only take this excess could lead to a beneficial arrangement. Imagine her surprise when the man that discovered her coven didn't demand her life, but a custom-made dream. Now, to take notes. The small intruder was quick to take out a bit of parchment and a quill. He holds the lowly mage quite fiercely. The bird girl is covering both with her extended wing. The lizard girl is being used as a pillow by the cute druid. Must have a soft underbelly. When the Succubi matriarch proved to be capable of giving that first adventurer the lewd dream he requested, she found herself being showered with requests. When news of her capable hands reached the guild master of that time, she was allowed to request a reward in exchange for allowing said guild master to taste all the attendance he lusted for, in his dreams, of course. That reward became the current building she and her coven were using now, which was finally recognized as a proper establishment. Unfortunately, not being a secret also meant that sometimes odd jobs found their way into their hands. One such job was to find the proclivities of an individual. Their existence was already illegal in the eyes of the churches, and the request involving absolutely no harm to the target, the Cream Cafe, found no reason to refuse. Alright, Mr. Cute Archdruid, I'm going to enter your dream for a moment. With a little bit of focus, the little succubus began to use her mind to poke the essence of the soul male in the room. I promise I won't touch anything, I just want to see a little bit. Flashes of images began to take form. Giant towers of glass and steel, an academy the size of a large city. Izuku Midoriya was being lauded as a hero, someone whose mere presence filled the hearts of all the good people with peace. Wait, is it? The succubus was utterly confused. Dreams of being lauded as a hero were almost always followed by the need to have multiple mating partners. Then they were always followed by the man being surrounded by ludicrous amounts of riches. Why was this boy living in a tiny blocky home? Seeing such a hard-working hero conforming with such a pitiable lifestyle was unheard of. At least most of the items looked to be of high quality, but still. Getting home after a day at work, being embraced by his lovely wife and family. Wait. There are 3 girls in the image. Now the succubus was getting desperate. Her target had declared 1 wife, but the image showed 3 loving girls. Which one? Or is it all 3? Already desperate to get good information, the little succubus decided to push a little harder, goading the boy to either pick one, or jump into bed with the 3, and see which one he liked more. The attempt, made with true finesse, still produced a tiny frown on the face of the young archdruid, nearly imperceptible to almost anyone, almost. A pair of red eyes opened all of a sudden, darting instantly to the window. The violent killing intent leaked by the albino gator girl was scorching. Even when she didn't see the suspect of her rage. 2 buildings away, one petite succubus was shivering in true horror. The matriarch had trained each and every one of them to be able to sense danger and flee as fast as their wings could carry them. She had leapt out of the window's frame in a fraction of a second, before darting through the shadows to get away from that. She was still calming her heart with steady breaths though. What she felt back then, it was like she had poked the most beloved treasure of a dragon king. There was no doubt in her mind that if she had been a fraction of a second later, if that thing had caught sight of her, she would have been torn to pieces in the most brutal and savage way possible. How am I going to report this? The succubus muttered to herself in despair, knowing that she would be scolded if the information wasn't enough, and yet, there was no way she would try a second time. Not with that dragon masquerading as a lizard girl. The next morning, awakening at the first light of dawn was now the norm. Izuku felt like the sun beckoned him to raise earlier than any alarm clock of his old world. However, today something was different. What a weird dream, Izuku muttered to himself, shaking away any remaining thoughts on the matter. He had his usual fantasy dream of being a hero, saving the day, and coming home for well-earned cuddles. The last bit had become a new addition since coming to this world. But then, at the end of it, he felt that something was amiss, like some external voice was asking him which of his girls was meant to be his wife. Before being able to answer, his dream took a turn he really wasn't comfortable with. His girls were naked, and inviting him to. What dream? Megumin asked as she too began to get off the bed, startling her boyfriend a little. About being back on my homeworld, Izuku replied good-naturedly, while also omitting the wrong part. He didn't get to elaborate though. I was in that dream, right? Megumin was quite ready to throw a tantrum. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the sight. Well, he didn't know if he could take her back home. He knew that he really wanted to present her to his mother. Just like the others. Maybe there was some truth to the weird part of his dream. Perhaps he was too morally relaxed after all. I said it was a dream, not a nightmare. Izuku replied, giving a loving head pat to his girlfriend. Of course you were there, all of you. Izuku's words came out perhaps a little too lovingly, as Megumin was quite quick to look away to hide her blush. From her spot, Liza finally began to stir, her cold-blooded body already pre-warmed, thanks to the warmth of her beloved master. So, Megumin managed to control herself within seconds, and was already reaching for her clothes to change. What was weird about it? Izuku froze. He didn't know how to answer. He had seen Chika and Liza naked, so remembering them would be excusable. However, Megumin was an entirely different thing. Not only hadn't he seen her naked, she was also an educated human, and would no doubt freak out at the mention of such thing. Well, Izuku's stammering didn't go unnoticed, much less his growing blush. Oog, Chika's groan immediately dissipated the tension. Chika, both Izuku and Megumin asked in alarm. Harpies were widely known for being clean freaks, always cleaning their plumage, taking baths whenever possible, and overall refusing to get filthy. Megumin had been surprised when Izuku explained this behavior as not being vanity at all. It was hygiene. The only way for the oppressed harpies to grow healthy, or as healthy as it was allowed. Chika's belly is stuffy, Chika informed while she motioned to her lower belly, which was ever so slightly bigger than usual, with an egg. Izuku's mind short-circuited. He hadn't touched her. Well, not as in having sex, right? He has seen her naked, he did grope her tiny and lovable chest. And slept with her, every night. He didn't do anything to her while asleep, right? Suddenly, the memory of the dream came back full force. What if he did rape her in his sleep? With her slave mentality she wouldn't complain, of course, but that made it even worse. Were the others in danger? Did he attack them already? Izuku tried to say something, anything. If he did something already, then the least he could do was to take responsibility. Megumin quickly shifted her tiny hand to cover the quivering mouth of her boyfriend. Don't, Megumin said with a low voice that sounded like a hiss. Don't you dare to say anything, not until I see that egg. G. Chika's groan stopped any further discussion. She needed attention, not angry shouting right now. Guild Hall, 2 hours later. In a corner, one silver-haired thief brooded away as her thoughts kept haunting her. Not too long ago, everything she held dear and sacred was brought into doubt, the sanctity of her faith called out as a source of evil. This isn't fair, Chris the thief muttered while nursing her mug of ale. The antics of the cute and young archdruid had been upturning the world already, but did he really need to wreak havoc upon the faith of the people? Upon the name of the benevolent and loved goddess Eris? Her. The archpriest needs to repent, fix things before it's too late, Chris continued, ever so slightly betraying her true identity, speaking like Eris herself would. She could truly understand, she could see why the archdruid would strike at her faith. Her followers did attack first, so retaliation was in order. But said retaliation was going to be much more devastating if not tempered with benevolence. From a religious point of view, druids were exceedingly dangerous. Capable of performing miracles without requesting more than the bare minimum, willing to lend their help when necessity arose, and known for respecting the laws and beliefs of others, they could easily entice most people into joining their communities, if they had them. Why isn't he influenced by his class? Chris questioned the air once more, unable to get drunk, thanks to the insane amounts of stress she was going through. Druids were loners. Already rarely seen in civilized lands, and never taking companions barring a spouse or some pets, the commoners rarely had the chance of interacting with one, let alone take the time to get to know them and their ways. Nobles, too centered in their comfort, would never even strike up a conversation with one. Izuku Midoriya was the opposite, and that made him all the more dangerous. Kind, caring, charismatic, powerful, these traits already made heads turn his way and start asking questions about him, his creed, and his ideals. To make it worse, he was always seen in the company of various people. Rumors were already circulating. Maybe bonding with demi-humans while being a druid made them stronger and more reliable. Could druids buff their party members just by being there? Did the druid class allow them to live off the land so easily? Was it possible for a druid to end a drought without a hefty donation? Maybe the crop fields would grow better if a druid blessed them instead of the goddesses. They don't understand, Chris swallowed as her heart ached. Reincarnated people have cheap powers. As the goddess Eris, she was aware of Izuku's situation. She knew that he came from Japan, or at least one of the multiple versions of it. She had no idea what he asked for, but seeing a claw in the mortal world meant only problems. Best case scenario, she was the gift, meaning that now gods weren't safe from the rules of soul transferring. Worst case scenario, the big boss had finally snapped, and forced her to accompany Izuku to put an end to the long-lasting revolt of the Devil King. Both possibilities terrified her to no end. Fortunately, this one seemed to be a good hero. Much better than all the previous ones combined, already stronger than the still wandering otherworlders. Fine. I get it. Izuku's rather loud voice resounded in the hall as he and his party entered. This one is on me for forgetting something so important. Taking a good look at the young archdruid, it was easy to see that he was flustered. His companions were all showing varying degrees of amusement. Seriously, how could you forget it? Megumin asked with a rather large grin. She is important to you, and to me, and still you forgot that. That was the source of his stress that morning. Chika had laid an egg, and in his moment of panic, Izuku had begun to sputter nonsense about taking responsibility. By the time he was finally able to listen to his surroundings, Darkness, Union and Ila were already in the room, and were having a lot of trouble keeping their laughter to themselves. To be fair, I also forgot about it. Union supplied, still having trouble hiding her grin. I don't usually deal with harpies. What Izuku forgot was that harpies, like most avian species, laid eggs even when not fertilized. It was information available in the guild's encyclopedia, information he had read several times in order to understand and take proper care of Chika. Said information included the well-known fact that harpy eggs varied in size, depending on if they were fertilized or not. Chika's egg, while double the size of a chicken egg, was still too small to be a proper baby. I didn't know anything about that. Ila joined in too, unable to decide if she should feel flustered or outraged. The harpy was getting more attention than her. Izuku groaned in exasperation. He was embarrassed and chastising himself for what happened earlier. He blamed that weird dream though, as such misunderstanding like that wouldn't have happened if he hadn't been confused about his feelings. Not that he didn't find Chika sexy, or Megumin desirable, or Liza. So, what do you intend to do with the egg? Darkness asked as she and the others sat at their usual table. She found the flustered boy cute, but the egg couldn't remain ignored. Harpy eggs fetch a good price as an alchemic ingredient. The guild would also buy it, due to their value as monster lures. The church is a no-go since they only buy fertilized eggs, although the Empire. Darkness suddenly fell silent, eerily so as her face turned pale for some unknown reason, and her breath caught in her throat. It was like she had seen a horrifying ghost, and Izuku didn't like the situation one bit. Not a go either, it's too far away for the egg to last. Ila tried to pick up where Darkness left off, at least she could provide that much information, which is a shame because they Union had quickly kicked the ranger's leg, silencing her just before she could say something she shouldn't. Because what? Izuku asked, no longer confused. His party members were hiding something from him, that much was obvious. The Empire is well known for their practices in slavery, so we don't want you to go there and do something rash. Megumin elaborated as elegantly as possible. They pay a lot for things like eggs, because they use them in unsavory things. We know you want to do something about that, but you'll need to defeat the Devil King to have your voice heard. Izuku did look ready to march against the Empire and raze it to the ground. His party members didn't want to even imagine what their leader would do if he learned that in the Empire, harpy eggs were considered a delicacy among the nobles. They failed to suppress a shiver at imagining the inevitable genocide. They better hear me after I'm done with the Devil King. Izuku muttered with a somber tone. He sighed and turned to look at the harpy in question. So, Chika, what do you want to do with your egg? The black harpy was startled by the question, and with good reason. Slaves couldn't own anything as their masters owned everything they had, everything they were, even their lives. Belzerk was kind to slaves, but even then, a slave had nothing of their own. This wasn't her first egg, but the other two were taken away from her by her previous owner to never be seen again. Well, it is Master's egg, so, Chika really didn't know what to do or say, and her raspy whispers showed it. No, Chika. Izuku softly interrupted, it is your egg. Yours. You can keep it, or sell it to have money of your own, to spend on whatever you want. You can also destroy it so no one can have it, if you don't want anyone to touch it. Chika looked a bit troubled now. Being assisted by her master while laying it out had been endearing enough, but she had been allowed to carry it and toy with it for a while now. The idea of losing it was getting difficult to handle, especially after seeing her master cradling it like a real baby, even if only for a few seconds, until Megumin stated that it wasn't a live egg. No keep. Liza suddenly interrupted. She had been oddly silent and on edge the entire morning, although an outsider would never notice the change from her standard stoic self. Eggs, stolen. Everyone grimaced at the words of the always stoic gator girl. Commodities and highly sought ingredients would always catch the eyes of unscrupulous people who wanted easy cash. The egg of a harpy, being only valuable while fresh, would surely attract unwanted attention. Hello there. A certain silver-haired thief approached the party, immediately sending Izuku into high alert, although for different reasons. Long time no see. Hi Chris. Darkness replied good-naturedly. It hasn't been that long, but I admit we don't hang out as often as we used to. Izuku had completely forgotten that Darkness and this racist individual were actual friends, and shared the same faith. Watching her scan Chika with eyes that screamed anger and disgust, was a sad reminder that this world was a horrible place. I don't remember her being a wild harpy. Chris couldn't help but voice her confusion. After all, last time she saw her, Chika was missing her tail feathers and claw thumbs. Is that an egg? You can get good coin if it's fresh. Chris, Darkness's voice took a warning tone. Watching Izuku grow angry was a no-go in her book. Saints shouldn't allow negative emotions to guide them, after all. I'm not being confrontational. Chris defended, still failing to hide her disdain for the black harpy. I'm not nagging him about taking his slave to be trimmed at the church, am I? Megumin immediately moved to comfort Izuku, giving him pats on the back. He was getting really angry, especially at hearing how such savage mutilation was given such a trivial name. Chris gave a tired sigh. Trying to be nice around a harpy was extremely hard, but she was willing to do so in order to fix things between the church and this chosen hero. Seeing her temples destroyed over one harpy was not worth it. In fact, maybe having one harpy serve the hero and the church could be good publicity, leading to less wild harpies in the skies. Look, I want to apologize, alright. Chris tried again, happy to find that her words seemed to work. Eris teaches us to be benevolent and to show compassion, to always side with justice. Teachings that some priests sometimes forget to extend to those outside the religious order. Taking a moment to look at the faces still full of suspicion, Chris tried to act a little more bashful. It always worked on the good heroes. What I'm trying to say is that not everyone from the Eris church is as greedy and condescending like the priests that attacked you before. Chris tried to explain, feeling victorious when she saw the Archdruid relax. I mean, you have been working alongside Darkness. And, while I'm not fond of harpies, I understand you were not in the wrong when you solved the crisis with Keel's dungeon. There was a moment of tense silence as the people at the table seemed to take in the words of the thief. Then Izuku let out a very heavy sigh. Fine, I understand. Darkness has proven that there are some reasonable people among your religion. Izuku conceded, but his face hardened along with his voice, just as the thief was about to cheer on his change of heart. I still don't want anyone from your church to come close to my dear Chika or Liza. I don't trust any of you to not try anything against them. Liza? Chris asked in honest confusion. Eris only declared the harpies as her enemies. Why would anyone do anything against the lizard folk? Chris's confusion should have been understandable from her point of view. During the demi-human war, it was the machinations of the harpies that brought about the extinction of her beloved Avariel. That's why she made the extra effort of avenging them, leading to the absolute domination of the harpies in the actual era. Her teachings only reached the harpies, so other demi-humans. That hasn't stopped some priests from spreading the same treatment toward other races. Darkness explained, sounding really upset about the topic. I still remember a particularly energetic priestess trying to demonize the rabbit folk as well. My father was incredibly angry when he learned of how she cut the ears of a very young rabbit boy in front of me and other children. She still wasn't punished, just sent to another city. Chris was taken aback. Such extremist practices shouldn't be linked to her faith, especially when the rabbit folk didn't join the war back then. Then there was the absurd amount of anger emanating from the archdruid. The mark of a true hero, to wage war against injustice in any shape or form. Now, if only she could make him understand that justice wasn't always nice. There, Megumin went for more back-rubbing, fighting a losing battle against her boyfriend's rage. I know it's hard to know that, but for now there is nothing we can do about it. Truth to be told, Megumin also found it hard to digest. Her clan was fond of demi-humans, so much that they religiously kept their founder's shrine to the mythical catfolk, one of the first species to go extinct during the demi-human war. Cutting the ears of a cute little rabbit boy. Union was in tears. Rabbit folk were the favorite type of her family, and while they would never buy a slave, they would go out of their way to help and nurse them, even their animal counterparts. Chris cleared her throat, wanting to bring the conversation back on track, and trying to dissipate the growing anger of the young archdruid. Well, just to let you know, I have nothing against demi-humans. Chris clearly stated, trying her very best to start a good relationship with the reincarnated hero before her. And while it is true that I don't trust harpies, Eris must have a very good reason for that, so I'm willing to leave your harpy alone. I may tell you once or twice to be wary of her, but nothing beyond that. Your warning is not appreciated nor wanted, thank you very much. Izuku replied with a stronger bite he believed he could muster, but feeling Chika's fear behind his back was too much for him. Is that all? Izuku's mind made a mental note though. He felt Chika cowering behind him, but she was standing at the side, showing fear, but standing firm. Well, I also promised to not try anything against the gator girl, not that I can do anything. Is there any weapon that can pierce through those scales? Chris added, thinking that it was unnecessary with how stupidly strong that particular slave was. Besides that, I just want to offer my services to your party. Consider it when you want to go dungeon delving, as having someone capable of lockpicking, trap disarming and scouting is always a good thing. With a light wave of her hand and a playful wink, Chris left the party to their own devices. Izuku waited until the thief was well outside of hearing range to talk again. Chika, you okay? Izuku asked while turning to look at the harpy beside him. For an instant, everyone except Liza looked confused at the action. That was scary. Chika's shaky reply came a second before her head popped out from behind Izuku, which led to the other Chika fading away a second after. Chika thought she would lose her tail again. Izuku couldn't help but to give some head pats to the little harpy. It was impossible not to love her, even when her voice caused constant pain. Was it an illusion? Ila couldn't help but ask out of reflex, knowing very well that slaves couldn't learn magic because they couldn't get classes. Minor illusion, actually. Megumin replied without thinking, not that it mattered in the long run. I'm surprised she managed to use it that well though. Ila opened her mouth to question everything that was wrong. However, instead of talking, she reached for some fried toad to munch on. Izuku's party didn't make sense. In fact, the only reasonable constant was that no one in his party made sense. She would have lost her mind when fully understanding this if she hadn't become a part of this increasingly senseless anomaly. She took down a rookie killer in 2 shots. The black harpy could be using some enchanted gear for all she knew. Questioning anything would only make her look like an ungrateful bitch. Don't worry, Chika. Izuku tenderly reassured, giving some extra head pats. We won't allow anyone to hurt you ever again. Chika was quick to recover her cheerful attitude, feeling truly blessed by having Izuku declaring such things. Master. Chika has decided what to do with the egg. Chika suddenly reported, making everyone wince because she failed to contain her voice to a whisper. I want Master to have it. That way Master can choose what to do with it. Master is wise. Are you sure? Izuku asked with worry, failing to notice how the 2 crimson demons of his team rolled their eyes at his loving antics. If I choose to sell it, it would mean that someone else will use it instead. There was a moment where Chika's face showed some worry, but it was quickly replaced by an uneasy smile. Chika is sure. The black harpy returned to her well-contained whispery voice. Master will choose the right thing to do. Once that was said, Izuku made to grab the egg, which was no longer on the table. There was just a second of deadly silence before Darkness stood up in the most rigid stance everyone had ever seen her in. Excuse me for a moment, I need to ask Chris something real quick. Darkness said through clenched teeth, before marching toward the thief who was already talking with what appeared to be a fat and rich merchant. Don't worry if you hear some screaming. I wasn't going to keep it. Chris's panic scream was heard through all the guild hall. I was just getting it appraised to help him sell it. At their table, Izuku was seething. Megumin, now aided by Union, was trying really hard to keep him still by patting his back, while giving him words of reassurance. It wasn't helping enough, as seeing Chika sobbing in silence was more than enough fuel to keep his anger raging like an inferno. I guess I'm destroying that egg. Not even I can tolerate strangers handling it. Izuku replied after calming out a bit, and only because he could see darkness returning with the egg in her hands. Next time something like this happens, I may end up upturning the entire place. Izuku's muttered threat didn't go unheard. Luna was quick to take note, and promptly sent a very threatening warning to the silver-haired thief. And a notification of a mark on her adventurer's card. It made her blood boil to think that after everything the church had done against him, these idiots kept piling up reasons for him to leave. Couldn't they see that without his hard work, all the bonuses, incentives, and supply of good quality ingredients would be gone? Later that night, after completing the usual round of quests, curled up into their comfortable sleeping positions, Izuku, Megumin and Chika dozed off in peace. The day may not have been any heavier due to the quests taken, but their confrontation with Darkness's friend had been more taxing than they thought at first. The thief indeed apologized, although she still insisted that she was trying to help the party. She was also visibly dismayed when Izuku expressed his newfound distaste for her class, and her two-faced religion. Izuku would admit in private that he felt guilty for the harsh words given, but at the time he was truly furious, because such a callous act had made Chika cry. Slaughtering a large pack of running lizards had certainly helped with the anger too, even when he didn't kill them all. In fact, everyone was surprised when he went through the trouble of just culling their numbers, ensuring the quality of the next generation by not targeting the queen and those close to her. Izuku had to then take a few hours to explain why it was important to protect the balance of the ecosystem, and why eradicating a whole species was always a bad idea. When the day was over, their energy reserves were depleted, and that was why they were so quick to fall asleep. Except for Liza. The room was dark and absolutely silent. The soft snoring of the sole male and his girls was so insignificant that even a mosquito would be detected. And Liza was perfectly aware of that. Last night something committed the unforgivable crime of disturbing her beloved master's sleep. She didn't know if such a thing would happen again, but she wasn't taking the risk. That's why she insisted Izuku used a pillow between his head and her belly, much to her absolute discomfort. Unknown to many, she didn't require a lot of sleep. 1 hour per night was enough, and taking short naps of only a single minute while the party wasn't moving helped greatly to keep her full of energy. Energy that was rarely used thanks to needing little activity throughout the day. It wasn't like tearing a bugbear apart, and moving away a large boulder counted as exercise for her. Watching the night pass away while listening to her master's breathing rhythm and steady heartbeat was bliss for her, and still she kept close attention to their surroundings. Well past midnight and only the wind outside seemed to try to disturb the tranquil peace inside the room. Then something changed. Really? You got scared shitless by one of the dumbest creatures to ever live. One soft voice was barely heard, and only because Liza had incredibly good hearing. This is why you can't rank up. Suddenly, the sounds of flapping wings joined the background noise. It was like hearing two little bats. Sis, I don't think we should do this. A second voice sounded, shy and meek. It was familiar, wasn't the information enough? Two small things flapping their wings and gums outside the window. While annoying to her, her master was still undisturbed, no reason to move, yet. According to the matriarch, no. The first voice replied, the client wants to know what to offer him to stay permanently in the city. The matriarch also wants him to stay. Apparently he is quite good at keeping the city safe, which means more free time for the local men to think of women and sex. That's our food, you dunderhead. Liza could only understand that these two wanted to find out how to ask her beloved master to stay. In her opinion, such a thing was stupid. First they should ask nicely, then offer to get rid of the idiots pushing him away. Then again, intelligence wasn't her strong point, and maybe asking him to stay was far more complicated. Still, nothing would excuse disturbing her master's sleep. I see him, that's a cute harem, the more experienced voice continued, and that's the brute. Okay, I get it, those are some intimidating missiles. I doubt she can do anything about magic though. Liza couldn't care less what they thought or said about her. The only important voices were her masters, and to a lesser degree, Megumin's. Chika was important as something to protect, but her opinion was not important. Magic began to seep into the room, slowly but steadily reaching for Izuku. Lisa tensed, getting ready to strike, but kept still. She wasn't sure what kind of magic it was, but she knew something changed inside the room, and yet her master remained undisturbed. By the flames of hell, the experienced voice exclaimed in barely contained surprise. He's so pure, it's disgusting. Izuku remained undisturbed, but that insult against one of her master's virtues wasn't going to be forgotten, or ever forgiven. There's nothing wrong with that, the shy voice retorted. I don't think dreaming only of sex is necessary. That's because all the men you had were those seeking a pure girl to date and romance. The experienced voice shot back, seriously, get into an orgy already. Cute romances to us like cereal and milk is for humans, you can't live off of that. The bickering died, but they remained there. Liza didn't relax, not even a bit. If her master was not disturbed, so be it, but if that changed, ugh. I can't stand this boring shit anymore. There was the experienced voice again, let's spice things just a bit. Let's push him just enough to see his perverted side and gather what we came here for. The shy voice whimpered in fear. And then, it finally happened. Izuku's cute face frowned. His peaceful slumber had been disturbed ever so slightly. Liza needed no further incentive. With speed, agility and flexibility that her form had no right to have, she disentangled from her privileged position, allowing Izuku's head to safely land, thanks to the fluffy pillow, Megumin and Chika undisturbed due to their prized headdress being Izuku's chest. The Succubus outside had no chance whatsoever to react. The distance between themselves and the enraged gator girl became non-existent in a mere heartbeat. The windows, resistant enough to just resist an accidental hit, may as well be non-existent when tested against the outstretching arms of the mighty dragon totem warrior. To be fair, even a thick brick wall wouldn't have been enough either. Crash. The extremely loud sound of a window being smashed with extreme prejudice was enough to awaken the other 3 occupants in the room. It also woke up everyone else in the inn. While Izuku couldn't help but stutter, he was startled by the loud sound and the repeat of the lewd dream. What happened? Megumin and Chika were just as startled. They had just been in the middle of romantic dreams themselves. They had no need of Succubus aid though. Master, awake. Liza asked with an apologetic expression. Sorry. Hearing her cute apology had nearly no effect. After all, she was holding 2 winged girls with her clawed hands. Said claws were wrapped around each girl's head. It was very clear that she could crush their skulls like a gorilla with a ripe tomato anytime she so desired. What's going on? Darkness shouted as she rushed inside the room, still dressed in her nightgown while wielding both club and shield. What happened? Hila was right behind the knight, already scanning the room with her bowgun, her own nightgown doing no favors for her newfound bravery. Why are there Succubus here? Union screamed in disgust while pointing her cute one toward Liza's prisoners. She was wearing a bunny Onasi, she looked adorable in it, and if not for the current situation, Izuku would have asked where to get one for Megumin. Still being held by what could only be draconic claws of doom, the pair of Succubus couldn't help but despair. They had been found, they were captured, and now, most likely, they would be tortured to death. If not by a religious group, then by the matriarch herself for fucking up such an important job. Magnus. Hopefully no one is expecting this story to follow canon, right? No one is going to assume that canon events will be kept untouched, right? Omake a letter home for all about then. Hila was sitting on a desk inside a room. Before her was a piece of parchment and a quill. Her current task was to write a letter home. It was not the first letter she writes, but this was going to be the first time she actually sends it. Letting out a sigh, she decided that this should be done, and there was no point on delaying things anymore. Dear Dad and Mom, since the day I left you to become an adventurer, a lot of things have happened. First, I fell in love like an idiot, becoming a follower to a young man who carried a relic weapon. It was just like you warned me, he called himself a hero, and for a time, I actually thought he was one. He was handsome, he had money, and he had power. And I got blinded by all of it, becoming incapable of seeing the glaring defects of this man. I thought he was dependable, because he was able to tackle all challenges without breaking a sweat. I thought he loved me, because he treated me well. I thought he was perfect, because I couldn't see any defects. I wish I understood sooner. Before letting him embrace me. Don't worry, I carry no burden for my foolishness. I also made sure to never let him know my noble status, not that I have, or ever had, any claim to our family name. I know I have no right to any inheritance, and knowing you never hated me is more than enough treasure to cherish my true name. Still, at the time, I thought I was set up for living a fairy tale of my own, getting the hero for myself. Even though he got another woman in the party, a woman he also treated well, which he also embraced behind my back. So, it happened as you warned me. He tossed me to the side when I was no longer needed, to pay for a massive debt he saddled himself with. Because he challenged someone far stronger than he would ever be. It was my fault too. I foolishly believed he would come back to rescue me after chaining me with his debt. Now I understand what he truly was. A spoiled brat with a relic weapon. The weapon carried him through all the challenges. So I was carried along. That path leads to complacency and stagnation. It also leads to a false sense of superiority, because he thought he couldn't lose, and that he was always in the right. That's why he fought, and lost, to a druid named Izuku Midoriya. Perhaps you heard of him by now, as the man who killed Beldia, the general of the Devil King's army. That's the man I serve now. I say serve. Like he owns me. But in reality he freed me of the massive debt, and now I follow him out of gratitude. He taught me how to fight, how to use my skills, how to deal with the guild. He's been teaching me a lot, and even commissioned for me a crazy weapon that is on par with a legendary bow. And the only thing he asks for in return is that I keep growing and learning. It is as Dad said. Mistakes makes us learn and mature. He said something similar to Kayaya though. He intends to fight against the Devil King himself. Unlike Kayaya, though, I actually believe he can do it. He is crazy strong, and is followed by crazy strong people. I don't know if I'll be able to keep up the pace, but at least I promise to make you proud with my own achievements. I love you, and miss you. Like I miss all my brothers and sisters. With love, your youngest daughter. Fioila Bellaflor. Taking a moment to look at her writing, Hila decided it was good enough. She could have mentioned how she killed a rookie killer herself, but that may have gained enough attention to be summoned back home, maybe even have the inheritance order shifted. She didn't have the heart to do that to her brothers. Besides, if she was going to have her own ability title, she decided she wanted to earn it herself. Well, maybe earn it as part of Izuku's party, but with her own effort. Omaka reaping what you sow. Halfway to Alkenrisha, Aka's party had to stop on a small town to restock provisions and make some extra money through quests. While Aka's habit of spending a little too much money on alcohol was bad enough, Kayaya's inability to say no was way worse. Why can't this town have good wine? Aka whined while nuzzling her bottle. It was the last one. Why can't these people understand that without good offerings, there can be no good blessings? Kamiya, the thief, was having trouble seeing this party succeeding. To be fair, she knew that Kayaya was partially responsible for this. It was the blonde idiot who spoiled this bratty archpriestess with high-quality wine. It was the swordsmaster who insisted that his Lady Kwa deserved only the best of everything. That it burned through their pockets really fast. Well, through his pockets. She wasn't using her own money on some bitch's vices. The only reason she hadn't killed the bitch is because she had rejected all of Kayaya's advances. It was only a matter of time before Kayaya gets the hint and returns to her waiting arms. Hey, did you heard? Someone angered an ancient lich near Axel not too long ago. Clemia went stiff at the rumors. She clearly remembered that particular dungeon raid, and how it ended poorly before the archpriestess could properly purify the area. At least she got a bag full of coins. Yeah, I heard a powerful and benevolent archdruid put an end to the lich. At the mention of an archdruid, the thief quickly imagined the freckled cute boy that humiliated Kayaya back then. She still called foul play, but Kayaya didn't help with his reckless challenge in the first place. You mean the same archdruid that exterminated Beldia? Why is such a monster not in the front lines? Clemia froze. Were they talking about the same archdruid? Kayaya refused to march against Belida due to the difficulty of the task. His explanation of needing a higher level had been not without base. Belida had killed countless adventurers through his career, including wielders of legendary gear. And she was expected to believe that the cute boy that defeated Kayaya also defeated such a monster. Perhaps that's why Kayaya lost. Or maybe she just chose wrong. Maybe she should have taken the dead on her name to stay beside such a powerful individual. Defeating Belida was meant to be the first step into the main stage of the world of heroes for Kayaya, and that first step was now gone. Well, I'm sure he didn't solo that monster. I heard he is accompanied by 2 crimson demons, a mighty crusader, and a ranger that soloed a rookie killer. I can see such a group of monsters taking on Beldia. Clemia froze yet again. Did they just mention Ela? Soloing a rookie killer how? A party full of monsters, a lizard girl crushing her sword with her bare teeth. She did made a mistake, didn't she? If she had taken the dead, would her skills have been boosted to such a degree she could solo a rookie killer? Her skills haven't gotten any better since she begun following Kayaya, and Ela's became top-notch in just weeks. What do you mean we got marks on our adventurers cards? Kayaya's wail was more than enough of a signal for the thief. This party was no longer a good fit for her. As discreetly as she could, she unregistered her name from the party, and used Lurk to abandon the guild. The mark will make things difficult for a time, but she wasn't a branded criminal. She was sure she could return to Axel with some wise investments, and legwork. From there, she will have to find a way to convince the cute archdruid to take her in. Dealing with men was one of her skills anyway. Clemia. Kayaya called for aid, just to find a lone drunk on the table he chose. Clemia. Kayaya quickly found out that having a powerful weapon meant nothing if you can't take quests to earn money. He also found that his beloved goddess wasn't fond of making sacrifices. Girl talk for all about Nadine. As usual, the party of the #1 adventurer was having lunch at the dining area of the guild hall. Unlike most of the time, the young archdruid was nowhere to be seen. It had been a long day of exterminating packs of goblins, direwolves, direbears, and a couple of bugbears, all of them victims of Izuku's anger, an anger born due to the stupidity of a religious thief earlier that morning. I never thought he would be so angry. Ela spoke after taking a few bites of her food. For the ranger, many of the quirks of her party were still new to her, and difficult to understand at the best of times. Izuku's love for his party members as a group was a given, as his status and power meant that forming a harem was an obvious step. However, his overwhelming protectiveness of his slaves was shocking. Master's love is warm, Chika whispered, earning tiny winces from her companions, who were still getting accustomed to her voice. Chika is very happy to be loved so much. When Izuku left them all in the guild hall, he had ordered Liza and Chika to stay there too, giving them the duty of protecting Megumin, while he sought a moment of peace for himself. In truth, he just wanted to pay a visit to Wiz in private, intending to put Chika's egg to good use, and not having to deal with the idea of someone else mishandling such a precious item. While Chika had obeyed the order with a hesitant smile, Liza had immediately tensed, wanting to follow him to ensure his safety. In the end she couldn't disobey, but her body had remained tense from that moment onward, and the rest of the girls knew that the first to bother her would most likely not survive her first blow. So, Union called to their attention, her social awkwardness shining like sun in the middle of the day. Who does he love more? The entirety of the group fell silent. There was no secret that Izuku and Megumin were an item, much less that they shared a room, but at the same time, he took his 2 slaves along during the night. The rumors flying around were nothing short of scandalous. I mean, he sleeps with the three of you, Union continued, trying to have her very first girl talk moment, and he is very nice and caring to all of us too. For the Crimson Demon clan, a girls talk session was no ordinary thing, nor a trivial moment of bonding. For them, it means traversing a dangerous minefield where a lie could be just as disastrous as the truth. It was a battlefield where private reputation and public image rested on the edge of annihilation. Well, don't look at me. Hila quickly answered, I'm the newest member, and I have done very little to earn such affection. The ranger knew her place. She was the newcomer, and her entrance in this elite group had been the result of Izuku's pity on her miserable life. The archdruid had no reason to rescue her, to take her in when he could have easily just sent her to work her ass off at the market. No reason to dress her in proper adventurer's garments and gear, to teach her how to use her skills and build. Then why did he do all that for her? I mean, it is true that he freed me from the dead. Hila began to switch gears, her voice taking a tone that denoted doubt. He also rescued me from the pitfall the other guy had me in by making me a proper fighter. The more the pink-haired ranger dwelled on it, the more she began to resent her previous party leader. Kayaya said he loved her, but he only wanted her to cheer for him, to be there to make him feel better. Izuku hadn't said anything about love or desire, but he had made her strong and capable. He had turned her from a cheerleader into a well-respected adventurer. Kayaya had dressed her like a doll, something pretty to look at, someone pleasing to his sight. Izuku had dressed her in proper gear, giving her the tools to grow into her own self, and the freedom to become the strong woman she desired to be when she left home. Would that be love? Do you think he likes me? Hila shyly asked, her face slowly developing a full blush. I don't want to disrupt the order, I think, maybe. A saint's love does not translate to carnal desires. Darkness suddenly interrupted, her voice still sounded wise even after going through half of her beer mug. He loves us all, but he has no intention of getting between our legs. What was left unsaid by the blonde crusader was the fact that no one would refuse such advances from their party leader. Wait. Union suddenly shouted, sparkles in her eyes, sending a bad feeling down Megumin's spine. Does that mean it's alright to love him too? The conversation immediately ground to a halt. So far they hadn't done more than toy with the idea, fantasize with the concept. But now they began to consider it an option. Heroes and powerful adventurers always gravitated towards forming a harem, or a harem gravitated to their presence. For Union it was the most obvious thing to do. She couldn't bear the idea of getting between her friend and the cute archdruid, but introducing him to the clan was important, and she really loved how he treated her like a dear friend. She was fine with becoming a concubine. Why would that be wrong? Chika innocently asked. Chika thinks everyone should love Master. For Ila it was more than worth considering the option. She thought the Kayaya loved her, but comparing that to what Izuku provided her, it was like a sad joke. Her party leader would no doubt earn an ability title, and when that came, he would need a trusty aide to sort through the burden of being a noble, things that a druid would surely hate to tend to. Providing such aid in the form of a venerable second wife would be both a wonderful way to repay his kindness, and the perfect opportunity to reach her goal. Marriage, Darkness muttered in a low voice, however, her single word hit the others like a battering ram. For Darkness the chance meant accomplishing several major fantasies. She would be immediately disgraced as a noble due to Izuku not being highborn, her name tarnished by the rest of the noble houses, through bearing the children of someone who didn't even have an acknowledged social status, and yet, she would receive the perfect position to perpetually guard her saint. The very angels would treat her like an equal due to undertaking such responsibility, her very body becoming a symbol of purity by being the receptacle of the saint's lovely affections. You all better not get any weird ideas. Megumin finally warned her party members, he is mine, I'll be his wife. We already did it. Megumin just wanted to reaffirm her position. She really didn't want competition, and while it was true she would absolutely share Izuku with Chika and Liza, she knew that the demi-girls had absolutely no intention of dethroning her. Seeing the looks of envy and outrage from the other girls meant that she had fucked up though. What? When? How was it? Megumin reeled back. It was obvious that exposing her little secret had backfired in the most horrible way. So this is where you are. A sudden male voice interrupted the storm that was about to be unleashed. You again? Darkness asked in a rather annoyed tone. My answer will not change, Yavin. I'm not handing over my shield, nor my club, to anyone. The young man that had interrupted the group was a lanky-looking guy with blonde hair in a bowl-cut style, and blue eyes that looked full of lust and greed. He was also surrounded by 3 female warriors clad in bikini armor. Ila had to fight a small episode of PTSD upon seeing the group. Not even for double the amount. The man asked, narrowing his eyes in obvious discomfort. Not even for your life and soul. Darkness replied without hesitation. Many had asked Darkness about her ironbark gear, and most of them had requested trades. The shield and club Izuku had made for her was classed as made from ironbark, however, they didn't act like gear. Ironbark, when correctly handled, showed steel-like properties with only a fraction of the weight. It was a renowned material, but it wasn't as coveted as mithril, adamantite or chalcum. Izuku's gear, however, outclassed the most coveted material known in the kingdom. The iron bark grown by the cute archdruid was harder than adamantite, and resisted magic like a mithril or a chalcum alloy, all without weighting more than standard iron bark. The thorns adorning both items weren't just for show either, making both items exceedingly dangerous. Eldia claiming them to be blessed by multiple gods just made things worse. Stubborn bitch, the blonde guy sneered, but otherwise didn't do much. The man bothering darkness was the son of a noble, and as such, he always wanted to get his hands on powerful artifacts and gear to adorn his sexy followers. As the son of a noble, he was known to pull rank to get his way whenever possible. However, he was also aware of where his place was in the hierarchy, which was worlds below darkness. Being adventurers meant that he could get away with a lot of disgraceful behaviors, like throwing light insults, or bothering her with constant requests for a fair trade. But he would never be able to raise his hand against her. The son of a baron challenging the daughter of a duke would mean the immediate execution of not only his life, but that of his entire family. What about you, cutie witches? The guy turned his attention to the two crimson demons. Any epic legendary gear you can show me? Perhaps the well-developed one wants to join my elite party. The young noble asked the last question while eyeing Union, or rather, her breasts. No? Union panicked while shielding her chest. She may have been starving for attention, but the only eyes she could tolerate looking at her with lust belonged to her party leader, not some sleazy noble. Before the noble creep could say another word, or even try to make a move, Liza stepped between him and the crimson demons. Her face revealed no emotion whatsoever, but even someone as dense as the idiot son of a baron knew not to mess with a gator demi-human on guard duty. They were both simple-minded and slow, but absolutely deadly when engaged in combat. Master Yavin, how about that epic bowgun? One of the women following the noble asked while pointing at Ela. That's the original one, which means it would be better than any replica that damn dwarf can make. The observation helped the idiot noble to overcome his temporary fright. The animal had shielded the witches, not the other girls. You, commoner. The blonde idiot pointed toward the now panicking ranger, who just hugged her weapon like one would shield a baby. Hand over that epic weapon, or what? Izuku's voice froze not only the invading group, but the entirety of the guild hall. The question rolled off the tongue of the druid without any of his usual kindness. The idiot couldn't find his voice. The archdruid, the man that destroyed Kayaya, killed Beldia, and vanquished an ancient lich was looking at him like he was nothing more than a worthless insect that had scared his lovers. Leave. Izuku ordered. His bottled anger, product of having to deal with the zealot of a thief earlier that day, was bubbling up. The invading group ran away as fast as their legs could carry them. They would later change the facts to make it look like they had enough skill to escape from an angry god, not that Izuku cared about that. Are you all alright? Izuku asked, his voice now full of the love his party members were accustomed to. Did that guy try anything? Before anything else could be said, all the girls, save Darkness and Liza, darted forward to hug their beloved leader. Not knowing what to say or what to do, Izuku attempted to hug everyone back, making use of his vines to further instill a sense of security on his beloved party members. Said hug also encompassed Liza and Darkness, much to their enjoyment. Magnus. Don't worry, next chapter will be a proper chapter. Omake their first time, in the privacy of their in-room, under the cover of the night, Izuku and Megumin were cuddling. Unlike all other times, tonight something special had happened. They had taken a step forward in their relationship, elevating the tone of their love for each other. Are you alright? Izuku stammered, shyly looking down to look at the petite girl nuzzling against his chest, feeling well. His questions were rather incoherent, but he was still reeling from what they had done just minutes ago. Megumin mumbled, still a little shaky due to the intense experience they had just undergone. Still feeling slight tremors from each other, the young couple continued to cuddle, basking in the realization that their bond had deepened to such an extent. Megumin happily nuzzled into the chest of her amazing boyfriend, while Izuku held his beloved girlfriend quite fiercely, taking turns between caressing her hair and lovingly rubbing her back. It took a couple of minutes for the petite girl to finally summon the courage to look up and meet the eyes of her man. Both were blushing, but not shying away. Can we? Megumin hesitated for a second, her blush growing in intensity. Can we do it again? It was Izuku's turn to turn a deeper shade of red. He couldn't help but nod. After tasting the taste of love, he found it impossible to deny such requests from the girl he loved. Shyly, both teens moved to close the distance between their faces. Their lips connected, delicately at first, and then, slowly they began to press against each other, seeking more of the feeling of belonging to each other. Passion began to burn quite quickly, and then their tongues collided in a soft caress. The stimulus was too much to bear, and they stopped. Just like when they started. They had finally kissed, and the glorious moment would forever be engraved into their memories and hearts. The last step. It was early in the morning, but the staff of the guild hall were already scrambling around. The hero of Axel had been attacked last night by Succubus. While the fact that such servants of the darkness were roaming in their city was scandalous enough, it was the news about Izuku being able to not only defeat them, but subdue them as well that was causing a ruckus. While most people believed the feat, no one could imagine how such a thing could be done. Alright everybody. Luna called those present to attention, knowing she had to act fast if she wanted to turn this situation around. We need to set up an emergency quest to find out where these Succubi came from. We have to show Izuku that he can rely on us, and show the churches how our town is not a den of heresy. Cheers erupted inside the building. However, it wasn't difficult to notice that the men were a lot less energetic than usual. Not that it was too surprising, considering that Succubi were known for being extremely strong against males. Luna did expect the day to become ugly. The Inquisitors no doubt would arrive on the scene and bother her star adventurer to no end, so she needed to prepare the stage for him. Good meals at a discount, well-deserved praise, getting permission to post a fake quest to reward his achievement, all good methods to make him feel better. She could even gift him her bathhouse vouchers with a letter to allow him and his harem to share a private. And the doors of the hall opened, revealing a furious archdruid, closely followed by an entourage of angry-looking girls, and one gator girl carrying 2 sacks, from where the heads of 2 crying females were poking out. Luna quickly came to realize that this wasn't going to be just any ugly day. Luna. Izuku called over as he walked to the booth, leaving only dread in the busty attendant. I need to talk to you, in private. The denouncement I have to make is rather troublesome. Taking a look at the followers of the Archdruid, Luna couldn't help but notice the gator girl, particularly the way she was actually glaring at the 2 female heads that were poking out of the sacks. Of course. Luna answered with as much professionalism as possible. Please follow me. 5 minutes later, inside a private room, Luna found herself staring not only at the annoyed Archdruid, but his 2 crimson demon lovers and the 2 slaves that refused to let their master out of their sight. The gator girl seemed exceedingly violent this morning, and the guild attendant wasn't going to test how little patience she had left. Then, Izuku explained the situation surprisingly quickly. Impossible, Luna despaired while holding her head in her hands. I'm afraid that's the truth. Izuku lamented, crossing his arms and giving a heavy sigh. I was also surprised by their confession. For someone who had been wronged so horrifyingly, Izuku had remained rather calm, if obviously annoyed. The oldest of the Succubi had confessed that they had been summoned by someone from within the guild, with the intention of getting private information on himself, namely his proclivities and possible gifts to offer him. It was rather tame compared to other possibilities, almost forgivable. And Izuku had no way to know how much of it wasn't true. Even if it wasn't that evil of an intention, it is still a crime. Megumin added, looking the most annoyed, not to mention the trouble we got ourselves into with the inn. Their dream had been fantastic, getting to know his world with metal carriages that didn't require magic or horses, giant towers made of steel and glass, getting to know his loving mother, and finally getting bold and sharing a bath, just for the dream to be interrupted when they were about to take off the towels. I understand. Luna immediately began to wave her hands in an apologetic gesture. The guild will pay for all the inconveniences. Glass was expensive, and very few buildings had it on their windows. Wiz was an expert at fixing them with magic though, so there had been little trouble whenever Chika accidentally shattered them. The innkeeper had been surprisingly understanding too. What had Izuku annoyed, though, was the idea of having to deal with an angry Eliza. The gator girl had been way too close to killing her captives. Izuku really needed to find a way for her to control her strength, or rather, find the will to show some restraint. Can you see to that before the Inquisitors arrive? Union shyly asked, as fun as it would be to start a fight with the church. Defeating and capturing Succubi were feats said to belong to those both pious and devout. To hear that a group of heretics did so without any kind of effort would make the already tense situation explode. Their chunny tendencies made it hard to resist, but both Crimson Demons knew that their leader really didn't want to let his rage surface. To be honest, they'd rather not see Liza go all out. Blood and gore were actually pretty hard to remove from their clothes. Don't worry. Luna was quick to agree. She knew better than anyone else that dealing with Inquisitors was really bad for one's health. The guild will make sure to properly deal with this. Knowing the heiress church, there would be a long investigation, and more than likely a purge inside the guild, but it would be much better than dealing with a case of widespread Succubi prowling in the city. If she was lucky enough, and the culprit was caught fast, the only one to be cut down would be the summoner. No need to further bother the Archdruid. Well, I wish you luck with that. Izuku finally said, handing over a piece of parchment with the information of the inn, and the amount requested for repairs. We'll take our leave now. Luna looked at the amount of money requested, and sighed in relief at seeing it was a rather modest sum. Small blessings. Chika is thankful this is over. Chika whispered in relief, her worries that this circus would extend until her beloved master snapped finally put to rest. Now we can all crash. Guy. How did that happen? The noises and scream managed to enter the private room. Before Luna could do or ask anything, Izuku was already moving into action. Darkness and Ila were still there, keeping an eye on the Succubi, so he feared that they had been hurt in an attempt to free the captives. And Izuku opened the door with such force that it almost broke. What's going on here? One look at the scene told its own story. Ila was sitting on the floor, most likely the result of falling backwards. Darkness, however, was holding the adventurer dust against the wall. 2 sacks were laying on the floor, empty, and there were no Succubi on site. Why did you do that? Darkness shouted at her captive, who was showing tears of pain and fear. I don't know. Thus replied between sobs. Succubus excelled at illusions and seduction, while the men of Axel were largely known for their proclivities. That was why he left Darkness and Ila in charge of the captives, and yet, it seemed he underestimated the perverts. Ila, are you alright? Izuku asked with care, his soft expression denoting how he cared for the well-being of his teammates first and foremost. Yes. The ranger replied as she took an outstretched hand. He pushed me, that's all. It was mostly the surprise. I see. Izuku replied with a kind smile, happy to see that nothing bad really happened. Darkness, what happened? Taking a deep breath, the blonde crusader left us go. But not before fixing him with a death glare. These damnable she-devils must have used one of their seduction spells without us noticing. Darkness replied with a sigh. Some adventurers approached us with questions, and this man sneaked around with a knife to cut the bindings. Before we could react, the winches flew off as fast as they could. Darkness' tone came off as full of hatred toward the Succubus, which was understandable due to her religion. Izuku, however, didn't hold that much animosity toward the escapees. They did try to use their magic on his dream, true, but the intent hadn't been an act of evil, or even an attempt to feed off of him. It made him wonder if they were truly evil, or just victims like the demi-humans. But Izuku's voice earned the attention of his party members. You two are unharmed. The worry in the voice of the archdruid made the hearts of the girls skip a beat, all of them. He was such a caring man, thinking about their well-being, rather than berating their failures. Or missing the vast bounty for the heads of the Succubus. Yes. Ila replied, now standing and showing a tiny blush. I was just startled, as I said before. I'm fine. Darkness answered, successfully managing to contain her disappointment at not being assaulted during the escape. I wasn't even attacked. As Izuku sighed in relief, Chika and Liza looked at the whole scene. The Black Harpy, now attuned to the works of magic, knew that no spell had been cast. She also knew that Megumin and Union were pretty much aware of that fact, if their glares were any indication. Liza, however, could tell that there were a lot of pheromones in the air, not feminine ones, just male. It was like most of the guys in the hall had been willingly lusting after the intruder she caught. While it wasn't their place to say anything, both had reached the conclusion that asking their master later would be for the best. Lina, Izuku called to the blonde attendant, sounding rather neutral in his tone. Can I trust the girl to handle this problem? It was an odd question to be asked, to be honest. With everything at stake, any other adventurer would be able to make pretty much any demand and get away with it. Anything was better than dealing with the Inquisitors. Even allowing said adventurer to do all sorts of evil things was better than to let the church burn down the town. Yes, of course. Luna was quick to answer, and eager to take the opportunity given to not deal with the church. I'll be sure to send you an appropriate compensation to your room tonight. Compensating the archdruid for this kindness was the least she could do. Of course, the said compensation was giving him her attention while wearing just one ribbon. No need. Izuku replied as he gathered his party, giving head pats to the demi-humans, and a quick kiss to Megumin's cheek. We won't be returning to the inn. It made sense, Luna supposed. After being assaulted by Succubus there, no one would want to return. The innkeeper no doubt would experience a reduction in clientele, thanks to the new reputation their establishment had gained. I see. Luna was quick to rethink her choices. She needed to make it clear that she, and the guild, were grateful. So, where will you be staying? Izuku gave out a sigh. Then Luna saw the rest of the humans in his party give smug grins her way. We wouldn't be staying in town anymore. Izuku revealed, leaving a petrified attendant standing in disbelief. Today we are leaving. Leaving? Luna knew very well that such a development was going to happen, but she still hoped it wouldn't happen so soon. Where are you going? When are you returning? Ha ha ha. Megumin laughter echoed through the hall as she posed extravagantly. We are going on a dangerous journey. We are departing this town of beginners to put an end to the eternal conflict. Immediately, Union joined the pose, even though she looked a bit nervous. We'll march to the front lines, to the edge of danger. Union continued, obviously enjoying the chance to demonstrate her heritage, but not as warriors, but like a fierce storm. We are taking a training route. Izuku interrupted, knowing better than to allow them to fantasize about raining massive spells over potential battlefields. We'll be heading to the next big city to spend winter there. Then we'll proceed to the other stops before heading into demon territory. Izuku informed the room while giving another once-over to Darkness and Ila. He really wanted to ensure they were unharmed. Luna had gone from startled to full-on panic. The best adventurer to ever grace the guild had just declared a suicide run. She couldn't allow it. Izuku, wait. Luna screamed as she reached to grab the archdruid's robe. That's too dangerous. Izuku stopped as he felt the tug on his clothes. Turning to look at the distressed attendant, he did notice honest concern. Pity the town lacked more honest people. The front lines are meant for the king's men and the chosen heroes. Luna tried her best to make her point, knowing very well that all the adventurers that had gone against the Devil King and his servants had died in horrible ways. The town needs you. We all need you. You make this place safe. Megumin and Union grimaced. Their beloved leader was rather weak to damsels in need of saving, in need of protection. Luna had been always supportive towards them, and her demeanor toward Izuku was glaringly sweet. They could easily see him giving in to accept a more permanent role in this side of the conflict, not that they minded, no. Izuku's response had been startlingly firm, much to the disbelief of his party members. The only reason I came to this land is to defeat the Devil King. The severity in the voice of the Archdruid gave everyone in the guild pause. There was no proclamation of greatness, no demands for recognition and reward. As if such things were beneath the desires of his heart. It is true that I found people to love, to call family, in this town. Izuku revealed, regaling his girlfriend with a tender smile. But rather than setting my roots here, I intend to return home after my mission is over. With my newfound family. Megumin had to lower the brim of her hat to try to hide her massive blush and wavering smile. Her boyfriend could get overwhelming romantic at the most random of times. Union, however, had her jaw dropping to the floor. This guy had just declared that he was going to steal her friend to a faraway land. Luna wanted to build an argument to convince the young archdruid that this town of beginners could become his home. But the memory of all the times that this town of idiots had pushed him away, the hostility of the churches, with no fanfare or further words directed to the adventurers or the guild staff, Izuku took his party and left the building. The hall quickly fell into a rather creepy silence. Everyone knew what kind of moment this was. The hero of Axel was leaving, for good, and no one had tried to stop him, or to join him in his heroic quest, not even offering words of encouragement. The people of Axel, the adventurers, were all beginners. Marching to the front lines was for veterans, people with talent and true strength. Everyone knew that no one was going to be of much help against the Devil King, and yet, Izuku the Archdruid had declared his intention. The adventurers were currently struggling to forget that Izuku was perhaps the most recent addition to the Adventurers Guild. They were trying really hard to convince themselves that the Verdunette had started powerful and wise, that his massive power was most likely a gift from his heritage, and not the result of hard work and research. They were trying truly hard to protect their lazy way of living, and were failing miserably to do so. Maybe we should. Dust started, his low voice still strong enough to be heard in the entire hall. Join him. Help him reach the front lines at least. Lin squeezed the hand of the blonde warrior, beaming with pride at the rare glint of bravery from the man she was dating. Keith and Taylor pondered really hard on the proposal, knowing very well that they had no special talent to offer, nor any special expertise or relic to help along the way. But their need to repay their life debt to the Archdruid was great, their pride as men and adventurers gnawing savagely against their need to avoid danger. Well, Keith began, obviously struggling to find some sort of speech to agree. Giving him a hand to reach the front lines would certainly increase his chances against the Devil King, and if he passes through Alkenrisha, we may be able to make a long stop to get plenty of holy water. Alkenrisha was the home of the Axis cult, and while the fanatics were annoying to deal with, the thermal waters and the cheap holy water were more than enough compensation for the bothersome cultists. And if he decides to reach the front lines through Minspaya, we can hit a local labyrinth for some rare items, Taylor quickly added, ensuring that whichever route the Archdruid chose would benefit them greatly. It is decided then, let's offer our services as an escort party. With the last cheer, the rather mediocre party left the building, making the rest of the adventurers feel even worse. Without anyone noticing, though, a certain silver-haired thief left the place too. Later, at Wiz's magic shop, Izuku looked at the shop where his undead friend resided. They hadn't been friends for too long, but Wiz was someone he considered a true friend. Reincarnating her was going to be a rather bombastic farewell, and he hoped that his departure didn't affect her too badly. Standing on his left side, the pair of Crimson Demons were locked in a heated discussion about the procedure to come, bickering about the possibility of changing the chant to increase the cool factor, and how much of an impact such a thing would have in the quality of the spell. To his other side, Chika and Liza were talking about what they would like for a last meal in town before the start of their journey, or rather, Chika was doing all the talking, with Liza just standing there, seemingly waiting for him to move or order something. Darkness and Neela were absent though, both having to solve some last-minute family matters. Reincarnation was a very taxing spell, expensive too, but the young archdruid thought it was worth it in the name of saving people, especially if they were friends. He would have to see to possibly recruiting an archpriest though, as he understood that using reincarnation was meant to be a last resort, or an emergency solution, not the go-to choice. He still shuddered at the image of the Linden mage crying in despair at changing races. Entering the shop, Izuku did his best to suppress various doubts and fears. Wiz had already declared that she didn't mind changing race, or even gender, if that meant being free of her burden. Wiz? Izuku happily called as he stepped into the eccentric shop, being closely followed by Union and his girls. We are here for a special service. Union had been exceedingly happy to find out that she was allowed to witness this miracle. Such occurrences were rare, as any spellcaster would religiously safeguard any secrets that granted them more power than usual. This was going to be her second time, and she still felt shivers about the chance to learn. One moment please. Wiz replied from the back of the shop, the sounds of rattling and rustling being faintly heard. I just finished your request. The group chuckled wholeheartedly, finding the antics of the shopkeeper charming. When she entered the room though, I was curious as to the function of the clothes you requested, so I made some for me with the specifications. Wiz explained as she walked in, spinning and posing all the way. "This is so comfortable. My back feels so free." The ditzy shopkeeper had no outward change on her clothes, as the same purple robe covered her like always, and yet she looked incredibly different. Where once her breasts were free to bounce wildly whenever she moved, now they were firmly standing as if on parade. "They look massive. I hope you don't mind," Wiz added as she began to place the requested clothes on the counter, completely failing to notice that Izuku had blushed and was now trying to look away. There was a great allure to watching breasts move freely, and yet, watching them standing firm had its charm too. "These are for us?" Union shyly asked while taking a hold of one of the cloth pieces. It seemed to be appropriate for her chest size, and after analyzing it, she noticed that the shape was meant to increase comfort, while the metal piece below the breasts was meant for support. "Is this some kind of charm that allows for increased growth?" Megumin was quick to throw her question, taking a hold of one piece that was better suited for darkness or Liza. It was easy to imagine herself growing to fill it. Izuku's blueprints had included a diversity of models. Sport bras were closer to usable visible clothing, while also being adjustable for small breasts, so he requested them for Chika and Megumin. The piece of black cloth would no doubt look fine as part of Megumin's outfit, while it'd be easily covered by Chika's. The others were variants of the classical model, so the top-heavy girls would find relief in the support provided, although Union would have to change her attire a little bit, lest the bra peek out from her outfit. "No, no," Izuku replied, making an effort to not think on peeking bras and girls too innocent to know what that meant. "This will help you while growing. It will give you frontal support so your back doesn't hurt, and your movement isn't impaired." While Izuku struggled to find words to properly explain things without sounding like a total pervert, his mind couldn't get over the fact that his petite girlfriend was indeed growing up. Now that she didn't deplete her mana everyday casting explosion magic, and regularly ate full meals, her body had begun to grow. She had grown nearly half an inch, and her dress was beginning to show signs of becoming too short. Little bulges of flesh were starting to perk off from her chest too. Perhaps not even an A cup yet, but if she managed to hit a growth spurt, okay then. Megumin replied, failing to hide her smug grin, knowing that her boyfriend did indeed notice her as a woman. "Here's your staff too." Wiz suddenly spoke, regaining their attention, making everyone aware of her anticipation. "I upgraded it a little bit." The staff that was presented to the young archdruid had a new addition. The beak of the cockatrice had been shaped into a spearhead, and attached to one end of the staff, turning it into a staff spear of sorts. Izuku finally had a functional melee weapon, even if it looked primal in nature. Taking the staff in his hands, Izuku could feel it fitting perfectly with his soul. Liza's protective nature in the scales covering the shaft, Chika's speed in the feathers adorning the top, and Wiz's faith in the care put into building it. "Wiz," Izuku's voice calling for silence drew all of their attention to himself. "Are you ready?" The undead shopkeeper nodded, showing a rare glint of determination. She was ready for this. Even if the spell failed, she had everything ready. Her demise would mark the beginning of the Devil King's fall. Her reincarnation would mean her freedom, and either way her dear friend would be safe. Meanwhile, Chris followed Izuku and his party using Lurk, and by blessing her stats with her divine authority. She couldn't afford to mess things up again. She had come to terms with the fact that she had fucked up in their previous interaction. Loving to play the part of the prankster thief, she had forgotten that in most versions of Japan, taking things without explicit permission was considered a serious offense. She should have shown common courtesy before showing off her skills. The archdruid's love for the harpy, while misplaced, was also understandable. Without proper context, and a thorough history lesson, most otherworlders would see the treatment of the harpies as something tyrannical. She was certain that after showing him the truth, he would, at the least, be wary of the harpies. Even if he still coddled his harpy companion. Unfortunately, things had aligned to make possible interactions all the more difficult. As the goddess heiress, she found it infuriating how both churches alienated the young hero, prosecuted him even though he wasn't part of either group, and then had the audacity of excusing their misdeeds by invoking their greater standing. She had already sent prophetic dreams scolding them all, and demanding them to change their twisted ways. And still, she knew that her decision wasn't enough. Now perched on the roof of Wiz's magic shop, Chris was doing her best to infiltrate the locale, and carefully watch what was going on. Wiz was a great source of entertainment and rare artifacts, but even she would think twice before fiddling with anything without the supervision of the ditzy shopkeeper. "So, what are you doing here?" Chris whispered to herself as she entered through one of the upper floor's windows. "What kind of rarity are you trying to get before departing on your adventure?" Looking through the cracks in the floor, the silver-haired thief managed to see the shopkeeper and Izuku's party. It didn't take long before she noticed that things were getting weird. "Is it a sacrificial circle?" the thief thought as she looked at all the stuff lined up inside that circle. Why would a druid need to do that? Why would anyone use that? Sacrificial circles were useless, an absolute waste of resources. Even the most desperate of wizards would only use one in the direst of circumstances. The floor was thick though, and the magic too dense for her to properly hear what was going on, so she could only wait and see. She could only hope to understand the young hero a little better, so she could convince him to accept her services. Magic began to flow inside the shop. It was a massive amount, and it resonated so beautifully that the thief couldn't help but be mesmerized. Is this his divine talent? Chris thought to herself as she failed to grasp why Izuku could cast spells on this level. Did he ask for the secrets of the arcane? Or perhaps the secrets of the nature of magic? Why does this feel familiar? Inside the shop floor, reincarnation. Izuku finished his spell, and Wiz was enveloped in what appeared to be a cocoon of emerald light. For the ditzy shopkeeper, it felt warm and cozy, like being embraced by a loving parent. The scarce seconds it lasted were some of the best she had gone through in her existence. If the spell were to fail and she ended up dead, she would still be satisfied with the result. When the light receded, changes had become apparent. First and foremost, her ears had been elongated, becoming pointy and rigid. Second, she had become ever so slightly shorter, with a slender build that also affected her massive breasts. They were still big, but now in the same league as Union, rather than the unreasonable size she used to have. It's over. Izuku breathed a sigh of relief as his friend had returned to life, and retained her gender at the very least. I'm glad nothing too draws. Ugh. Wiz's groan interrupted Izuku, giving him a severe case of panic attack. Seeing the ex-undead double over in apparent discomfort was starting to make him regret his actions. The thought of causing suffering to someone dear to him was unbearable. Wiz? Izuku shyly called, taking a step toward the aching shopkeeper, an action quickly mirrored by Megumin and Union. Are you okay? Union asked with a stutter. Being able to see the super spell again had been a gift to her, but seeing a potential friend's suffering was starting to affect her. AHHH. Wiz shouted as she arched her back, and then, Rayab. Her robes nearly exploded, revealing a pair of beautiful white wings growing from her back. They were somewhat shorter than Chika's, and the feathers didn't match any type Izuku could recognize, but they were beautiful and part of her new body. The Emerald Archdruid was looking not at an elf, but at an Avarial. EPPP. Izuku also noticed that, for some reason, Wiz had made her bra lacy. It was then that things began to cascade into a series of unusual events. Crack. Wham. From the ceiling, a silver-haired thief fell. Haphazardly landing, and pointing a shaky finger at the reincarnated shopkeeper, said thief began to sputter. The beloved. Chris incoherently began to shout, the Diron. Wham. Just to have Liza's tail fall upon her head, knocking her out instantly. For the gator girl, it was the most obvious thing to do. After all, the thief had been rather mean to Chika, so it stood to reason that she may hate any feathered friends. Since being mean to friends angered her beloved master, the reasonable thing to do was to remove such sources of anger. Hi there. Keel opened the door and entered the shop, closely followed by his wife. I know it's early, is this a bad moment? The ex-lek looked at the room for about half a second before things escalated yet again. Yek. Wiz shouted as she quickly covered her chest in a rather rare show of embarrassment. Oh www. The necromancer yelled as his wife jumped to cover his eyes. Union. Megumin called as she knew that she was the only one who could take command in this situation. Go get a spare robe. As the shy crimson demon darted into the back of the shop without even knowing where to search, the petite arch-wizard began use her large hat to provide some sort of modesty to the panicking woman. She hadn't failed to notice that Wiz had not minded Izuku looking at her, something she would have to question later, after things calmed down. About an hour later, and that's the gist of it. Sasha finished her account of what had happened to have them all reunited. In the background, an outdressed Wiz was chasing a distressed black harpy, blabbering about how they were now feathered sisters, and that they should spend time caressing each other's wings. I can't believe all that happened so fast. Izuku was amazed at the information. Without being told of anything, things had developed on their own to set Keel and Sasha as the new owners of the magic shop, while Wiz had gone through all the paperwork required to leave her life behind to either start anew, or to pass away without regrets. It pained Izuku to think that his friend was preparing everything necessary for her burial. I know. Sasha replied, showing her own amazement. You'll think that someone that ditzy would also be messy with documentation. Now Liza was being used as a wall to help Chika get away from the crazed shopkeeper. The barbarian was showing rather dull eyes at the antics of the winged girls, seemingly unable to care about them, at least for the moment. She is still a messy person. Keel added as he emerged from the back of the shop. She may call this a shop, but the pieces here are more fit for a museum. Almost nothing is usable. Izuku could only give a nervous chuckle at the information. He had also noticed that oddity, but had been too nice to mention that to Wiz's face. I'm sure you'll manage. Izuku stated in good spirits. He was still worried about what Wiz was going to do now. Outside the shop, so? Union asked to the now tied-up thief, too angry to show any of her shyness. That is one of the beloved. Chris continued to state, too far gone on whatever had her going. They were lost once, but now that she is here, they can return. For the goddess Eris, seeing her beloved children again, even if it was only one of them, filled her with hope. She even began to make plans to get her the perfect husband, a pure-blooded high elf that would give the best chances of continuing the Avarial race. With careful breeding, they could even become pure-blooded after just a few generations, and then she'd have her perfect children to dote on to her heart's content. Forget it. Megumin's words struck the thief deep, making her wonder why her idea of perpetuating her children's race was bad. She may have been reincarnated into one of the Avarial, but she is not some sort of prophet of Eris. If you want to take her to some sort of crazy zealots, then you'll find that we like to protect our friends. The Union nodded fiercely at that declaration, still pointing her wand toward the intruder. And if she wants to come to the Eris church? Chris asked, finally overcoming the shock of seeing an Avarial after so long. Don't you think she'll enjoy a better life under the care of Kui? Whatever else she was going to say, was interrupted by a horrifying screech that had everyone sans Union flinching in pain. The Black Harpy and the reincarnated Avarial were now flying in circles around the group, with the first fleeing from the later. We are both the same. Wiz shouted all too happily, arms outstretched in the hopes of catching the avian girl. Let me caress your feathers. I'll let you caress mine. Seeing the only Avarial in existence chase after a Harpy in obvious love, made Eris's blood boil. The last Avarial was choosing a Harpy over her. She quickly swallowed her anger though. Flying into a rage wouldn't help her here. She had to be cunning and win over the heart of her beloved child, no matter the cost, even if that meant having to form a party with a Harpy. I don't think your goddess would allow her to play with Harpies. Union casually threw out her thoughts, giggling at how childish the shopkeeper looked while chasing the petite Harpy. I also don't think Wiz will take it kindly, as she sees how Eris treats her beloved Harpies. That information gave Chris pause. How to cure the Avarial of her infatuation. Ready to go? Izuku asked as he exited the shop, closely being followed by the Dark Elf and the High Elf. Wiz will be joining us by the way. What? Megumin and Union shouted at the same time. One feared she'd get diminished attention, while the other had to add another obstacle in her goal of getting more attention. I'll join your party too. Chris also shouted, eyes full of determination. The first step to win her child's heart was to spend as much time as possible with her, and for that, she needed to be in the same party. You need my expertise. No, I don't. Izuku was getting annoyed. He had to leave town before dusk if he wanted to reach the next large town with time to spare before winter, so he couldn't afford to entertain zealots today. Why don't you take your expertise somewhere else? I'll let you know that I am the V. Whatever Chris tried to say was interrupted by a zealous albino gator girl. Master, says, Liza calmly repeated as her massive clawed hand enveloped the head of the now panicking thief, somewhere else. And with that said, Chris was launched roughly in the direction of the Adventurers Guild. She also joined the scarcely few that could boast about surviving an encounter with a gator demi-human, even if she was aided by her godly endurance, rather than skill or luck. Do you think she'll be alright? Izuku asked, slightly worried that his wording may have ended up killing someone. Do you want her to be alright? Megumin asked, knowing that the thief would only keep causing trouble if left alone and alive. Rather than answering, Izuku decided that now was the best time to leave. He was getting behind schedule now, and still had to modify the seating arrangement, now that Wiz was joining the party, even if only until she decided where to start anew. Later, at the gates of Axel, Darkness and Ela were still missing, but Izuku had faith in them. Seeing the carriage before him filled him with an odd sense of accomplishment though. The dwarves he had commissioned to construct it had done a superb job. The main body was made of thick insulated wood, reinforced with a frame of high-quality steel. Runes carved throughout the frame ensured that it would resist all but the most top-tier monsters that included dragons, and the special treated wood would not burn short of being thrown into an active volcano. The interior was cushioned for maximum comfort, and a set of enchanted stones helped to regulate the temperature to some extent. The wheels were quite the sight to behold too. Rather than the usual beam-supported wheel, or a plain thick wooden disc, it was made with round steel plates, thick enough to offer a lot of ground contact, which helped to distribute the weight. They were also covered with Izuku's vines, which worked like tires from his own world. To top it all off, the dwarves had used his blueprints for a suspension system, ensuring a much more pleasant voyage for everyone. There seemed to be a problem though. Who or what is going to move this? Megumin began to ask, failing to contain her curiosity. Monstrosity of a fortress. Union finished the question, equal parts amazed by the design, and baffled at the fatal flaw of the same. Before Izuku could answer, Liza walked to the vehicle, and began to move it back and forth a few centimeters, showing just a little bit of effort. Then she beamed at her master, expecting to be appointed to the job of moving such a thing, to show how useful she could be. Both Crimson Demons couldn't help but to take a step back at the show of monstrous power. No need to worry about that, we are going to use this. Izuku waved off the concerns as he pulled out a small pouch. Chika, come here. Izuku called for the avian girl, who instantly glided to his side, avoiding the still chazzing Wiz. Liza knew that her master required the full attention of the little trickster, so, with agility and speed she had no right to possess, captured the Avarial. Wiz didn't seem bothered by being held like a kitten by someone that strong, instead still flailing her arms in a futile attempt to catch up to Chika. Master? Chika shyly whispered, no longer expecting a scolding, but desiring some sweet words. Remember your egg. Izuku's question received a nod from the avian girl. I asked Wiz to turn it into this, the strongest fertilizer known to man. Chika gave a cute odd sound. She may not have understood all the words, but she had understood that her egg had been very useful to her beloved master. Now we are going to use it to create a new friend. Izuku added as he introduced a good berry into the pouch, a very strong friend for our new mobile home. As Izuku placed the pouch on the ground, he reflected on the skill he had purchased recently. It had cost a lot, but the description had been enticing enough for him to be unable to resist it. Activating both plant growth and plant manipulation, Izuku directed the good berry to germinate and grow into a shaped plant. Before the astonished Crimson Demons, a new plant creature was being created. Thorny vines expanded, twisted and knotted to form a body. It was like an ox, but massive, easily 2 meters tall. The hooves were massive, the tail ended in a spiked ball, and the horns were closer to those of a moose. The plant looked like a green bull with exposed sinew, or rather, behemoth. Union spoke without thinking, closely followed by a gulping Megumin. Both saw this as another creature of myth being born before their eyes. Now comes the real work, Izuku stated as he strengthened the grip on his staff, ready to cast his new spell. I call to you, woodland spirit, humble being standing before me. Izuku intoned, failing to notice the entire forest outside Axel standing to attention at his voice. Listen to my will as I guide you to a higher calling, a greater destiny. The bull made of vines began to glow, resonating beautifully with Izuku's mana. Unbound and unshackled, join me in my journey while learning what it means to live. Unknown to the arch-wizards, Izuku had yet again changed the chant, eliminating the mentions of forced servitude. Because life has form, form has life. Awakening. When the spell finished, the bull came to life. It made no verbal sound, but the steps it took toward Izuku made the ground tremble a little bit. Friend? Izuku asked as he extended his open hand towards the incoming creature. The massive ox-like creature happily nuzzled against said outstretched hand. Master? Chika was way too happy with the sight of the new friend made with her egg. New friend is like a baby. Megumin flinched at the comparison, not failing to understand the undertone used by the harpy. As Izuku began to attach the newly created creature to the carriage, Izuku failed to sense a few dark clouds approaching. His journey was about to start, but it wouldn't be without complications. Magnus. And Izuku's journey starts from the next chapter, and you can expect the unexpected too. In any case, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year. Omake Manstrubble. Kyayu Mitsurugi, otherworlder chosen by the goddess, and self-proclaimed hero, was returning from his work in the mines. It was not glamorous, and poorly paid, but with the mark on his adventurer card, he was forbidden to take even gathering requests. Just a little bit more, Kyayu bemoaned as he approached the third-rate inn he was booked in, the thought of his lady goddess welcoming him being the fuel powering his muscles. One more week of this nonsense, and we'll be able to afford that ticket to Alkenrisha. It was bullshit, really. Well, true that they had fucked up Keel's dungeon, it hadn't been that big of a mess up, especially if the rumors were true, and the druid fixed everything without help. Most likely the undead being weakened as a result of his beloved Aqua's divine seal. The charges of endangering an entire town should be null and void, but the king had decided otherwise, and he couldn't do anything else about it. Why does she denounce me like that? Kyayu made a short stop to ponder on the other charges. What they did to their ranger companion, or rather, ex-companion, was seen as a most despicable act. Even if the procedure was not illegal, leaving someone else with your debts was seen as an act of betrayal. Worse still was the additional shame of finding out that the girl had been able to pay the entire debt herself in a rather short amount of time, making him look as a truly unreliable party member. I don't deserve any of this, Kyayu bemoaned as he entered the inn. Hey, pretty boy. The innkeeper, a rather fat and big woman who looked as if she had some orc ancestry, called over the counter. Don't you dare to be late for payment. You know what I'll do to you if you don't pay on time, right? The rather feral grin on the woman gave Kyayu the shivers. I'll pay tomorrow, just like everyone else. Kyayu's reply was colored by fear. He really didn't want to spend an entire day entertaining this woman and her friends to pay for the room. The last flight of stairs was both dreadful and comforting, signaling the end of the day, and marking the beginning of more headaches. Aqua didn't like to make sacrifices or compromises. She wanted her liquor, and she wanted her pampering. Kyayu quickly had to learn that for such a refined palate, his lady goddess was unable to recognize her favorite fruity wine from the cheap moonshine sold by seedy bars. He also had to learn that the single bed in their room was never going to welcome him, as his lady goddess really didn't want to share it. I'm home. Kyayu nearly sang as he entered the tiny room. While he stopped expecting the traditional greeting long ago, he had come to expect some kind of rebuttal or complaint from his beloved goddess upon entering the room. Instead, there was a rather uneasy silence, and a suspiciously calm-looking goddess sitting in the bed, looking away, and shielding a rolled piece of cloth. Lady goddess. Kyayu's eyebrow began to twitch. You are not hiding anything, right? He knew he was to blame. He had promised abundance of the best of everything, and he hadn't been able to deliver. However, he expected certain level of understanding, like understanding the fact that they needed to save money to reach Alkenrisha. I don't know what you are talking about. Aqua's poor denial was more than enough. It didn't take a lot of effort to wrestle the bundled cloth away from the archpriestess, much less to find out that the girl had somehow found a way to use their savings to buy more liquor. Again, Lady Goddess, Kayayu was falling in despair. This would need another week of work, and eating just half as usual. I was going to use that money to pay the rent. Didn't she give you an option to pay without money? The core replied with a pout. Kayayu quickly began to reconsider the option of returning to Axel. Maybe then he could find a way to lift the marks on his card and recruit the ranger. He no doubt would be more useful than the thief that ran away with half of their money. A sad farewell. At the gates of Axel, a party of adventurers was in the middle of a summer conversation. The sunset would happen soon, and the wind was starting to become cold. I'm sorry, Darkness muttered while shaking like a leaf in the wind. Lady Lalatina Darkness Dustiness Ford was allowed to work as an adventurer by her father. As an adventurer, she had a lot of freedom that her noble heritage barred from her. She could have friends, explore dungeons, and get into dangerous situations, as long as she was within arm's reach of her family. However, she could never escape her duties as a noble. When she went to say her farewells to her father, he didn't take it lightly. Marching to the front lines was something she was immediately forbidden from doing. While she was allowed to risk her life as long as her body could be recovered, as resurrection magic was something her family could afford, dying on the front lines usually meant no resurrection, thus, no returning. Or Dustiness Ford had used his only viable card. He threatened her with taking Izuku's life, and the lives of her newly discovered family, as she went missing. Please forgive me, Ila bowed while hugging her Bianca, less in a protective way, and more like saying goodbye. Right now, the ranger wished she hadn't opened the letter she got today. It was an answer from home, and it had gone wrong in every possible way. Her parents were now on their way to Axel, to meet her beloved leader, and to try to marry him into the family. She would admit that the idea of marrying her party leader was nothing to run away from, but the intent behind her parents' idea was what gave her pause. They wanted to use Izuku's success to advance their agenda as nobles, to gain prestige and power. Of course, this meant that the inheritance order would have to shift to accommodate the new addition to the family. Not only would Izuku be forcibly transformed into a political pawn, she'd also screw up her brother's livelihoods. Also, the mental image of Megumin erasing her entire family, and most likely entire territory, was no less of an incentive to foil such a plan. She had no choice but to await her parents' arrival. Izuku didn't. There is nothing to be sorry about. Izuku answered to Darkness, and then he turned to Ila, and there is nothing to forgive. You have your reasons, and I respect that. Both girls had given a short explanation, neither wanting to go into detail. Darkness didn't want to shame herself before her saint, to show how she was still bound by her family, unable to follow the holy figure she desired so much. Ila couldn't bring herself to reveal her noble status, refusing to entangle her leader in the machinations of her family. They weren't expecting to be hugged by the Emerald Archdruid, much less for the kindness to feel so painful. It was getting closer to sunset, and their window of opportunity to depart was closing. In another time, in another world, Izuku would have waited until their situations were resolved, until they were ready to accompany him. I'll be waiting for you in the next city, in Rogard, as we planned. Izuku explained, showing his unwillingness to stay in Axel any longer. I'll wait for you until the start of spring. With that said, both noble girls broke into tears. As they watched Izuku turn around to take the reins of the carriage, the Crusader and the Ranger couldn't help but feel as if they had made the worst decision of their lives. It wasn't as if the party had been disbanded, more like they had abandoned it. Worse still, Izuku hadn't confiscated their gear, which made them feel even guiltier. Their eyes blinded by tears, both girls missed Chika and Union tactlessly waving goodbye as the carriage was dragged away by a stomping behemoth. Izuku, though, had no chance to wallow in his sadness alone. Megumin had tactfully chosen to sit by his side. Are you alright? Megumin asked, leaning on her boyfriend's shoulder. No? Izuku replied with honesty, I'm going to miss them. Taking a minute to remember all the adventures and misadventures they had with Darkness and Ila, he came to a sad conclusion. Without them, this trip is going to feel low. Izuku. The group of voices screaming his name forced Izuku and Megumin to turn around, even though the behemoth hardly slowed down. Dust and his party were running after them. We are going to help you in your travels. Dust shouted as he and his group got closer to the still-moving carriage. Izuku was going to miss his party members, but maybe the trip wouldn't be as lonely as he thought. A couple of hours later, well into the night, a single carriage moved at a steady pace. Lanterns at every corner of the roof were shedding emerald light, and only the sounds of the beast pulling it were filling the otherwise empty night. Stomp. 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 It was a loud sound. That isn't a golem, Lin muttered, lightly trembling while stealing glances at the plant creature diligently pulling the carriage. That is alive, and has a will of its own. The three guys didn't even try to reply. They could only understand that the behemoth was created by the Archdruid. The impossibility of such a feat had been poorly covered by the fact that it was Izuku, and their brains couldn't comprehend more than that. Maybe you should take a nap. Dust suggested while patting his own thigh, offering it as an impromptu pillow. I know it's not as high class as the interior of the carriage, but Lin simply accepted the proposal, mind too numb to even feel shame in front of the other two guys. Of course out here isn't as comfortable as the inside. I've seen expensive rooms less comfortable than this carriage. The group had been able to see the interior when Izuku offered Lin a place inside. Well, the guys had been awed by the sight of cushioned seats, a clean floor, and the most spotless ceiling they had seen in their entire lives. Lin had been horrified at the thought of being inside of what she considered a harem room. She had been a nervous wreck while declining the offer, for all the wrong reasons. Stomp. 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 At least we don't have to hear anything besides the behemoth, right? Dust playfully asked, earning groans from the rest of his party. They had managed to join Izuku, but now felt that their already diminished pride was being trampled. The beast of myth pulling the carriage was a better deterrent against attackers than they would ever be. They couldn't even offer their help to take the reins either, because the behemoth was not something they could steer, no matter how much they actually tried. The idea of being actually trampled into nothingness by a behemoth who might take offense to simple mortals trying to steer it was something that would never leave their minds either. How does one steer a behemoth? Keith asked to no one in particular. I guess you need to be Izuku to do so. Taylor supplied, giving the only explanation that made sense. They could already imagine Izuku actually putting an end to the war, and him getting a small mention as footnotes in the history books, as the lowly servants that carried his luggage. Inside the carriage, it was a mess. Izuku couldn't help but to look back at the day, at how his plans failed to come to fruition. Two important members of his team had to drop out of the mission, and he knew that no one was at fault but himself. I should have seen this coming, Izuku thought as he caressed the hair of his girlfriend. Izuku knew that his plan, from the standpoint of view of this world's denizens, seemed suicidal. The war had been going on for what seemed like forever. Those who went to the front lines were brutally murdered to the point that their souls didn't want to return. Anyone would see his mission as pure folly, as something better left to the king and his men. But the king and his men hadn't been able to make any kind of advancement in the war effort. The goddesses had been unable to find a proper hero. Something had to be done, and if he wanted to go back home, he would have to be the one to do so. A bit of rustling distracted the archdruid for a second. Chika had shifted slightly, stretching her wing to cover the couple's bodies better. I'll be sure to protect you all. Izuku thought as his heart flipped in happiness at being loved so much. I won't allow any of you to get hurt. Izuku had studied a bit about the actual war, and had noticed something that he should have taken into account long ago. No one had any common sense. The front lines of the war consisted of the king's men fighting against the hordes of the Devil King. However, that statement was an embellished way to say that both sides were holding their side of the frontier, watching the other like hawks to stop an invasion en masse. The actual fighting was being done by incursion teams consisting of one strong leader and their party of supporting characters. It was like the video games he faintly remembered, where the player took on the role of the hero, and their followers filled archetypical roles. Video game logic belonged to the video game realm. The real world needed a realistic approach. Incredible, Union muttered, laying on the other couch. She was thankfully using it as a bed, her legs up and away from Izuku's view. If this is true, I see, so this is what makes reality real. Union's rambling assaulted Izuku with nostalgia. She reminded him of his old self. At least now he kept the rambling to isolated rooms, and to moments where only his party members could hear him. Megumin loved to hear him ramble though. She'd also made it her mission to record his otherworldly wisdom on whatever paper was available. Izuku knew he needed to scout the situation first and gather data on the enemy forces. Once that information was compiled, he could construct a plan for a decisive strike that would bring as little risk as possible. With what little he knew of the barrier and the castle, the only plan he had right now was to gather the Crimson Demons, and have them bombard the Devil King's castle, with a barrage of big bangs. Unfortunately, such a decision would mean the doom of any slave and captive inside. Izuku hated the idea of making sacrifices for the greater good. Fluffy, so, Fluffy, the voice above Union sounded like someone having a vivid dream. Gim, Lem. Izuku smiled at the scene. Wiz was currently sleeping on the net designed to hold cargo. It didn't look anywhere near as comfortable as the couches, but her new instincts demanded a place above ground. Her new senses also demanded food, sleep and other bodily functions, things that the newly reincarnated Avariel had forgotten about during her tenure as a lick. It had been rather endearing how she gorged on the light meal they had consumed, how she screamed about how delicious all of it was. Then she got scared about the feeling of losing consciousness, and entered a state of childlike glee, upon discovering that she was going to be able to actually sleep and dream. She failed to understand her new body though, and ended nearly passing out in exhaustion, much to Chika's relief. Below the Verdinette's feet, a mass of muscle and scales shifted ever so slightly, reminding Izuku that he was still struggling to kick out the slave mentality from his beloved girls. When the couch proved too small for Liza to serve as additional cushioning, she took to the floor in a desire to serve as a footrest for her beloved master. Izuku protested, he really did, but the sad eyes of the albino gator girl won out in the end. Now he had to go through the humiliation of resting his feet on the body of a girl. It was hard to think of himself as a hero in such a position. He doubted that anything short of a metric ton of metal could prove uncomfortable for Liza, though. The carriage continued moving into the night. The rhythmic stomping, muffled by the thick walls, was a welcome lullaby to those inside. While the sadness still lingered, Izuku still felt his resolve taking root. He had finally moved from the starting line. New allies would join his party along the way, with some unable to stay until the very end, but he understood that his goal was too high for most people. His most important people were going to stay by his side until the end though, and that fact gave him strength. Knowing that they wanted to stay with him beyond that end goal gave him hope though. Even if he were forced to abandon the powers he had gained to keep his precious people, he'd keep advancing. Yesterday was left behind, just like the town of beginners. Izuku closed his eyes and surrendered to sleep as he understood that tomorrow would illuminate a new path to the future, or so he hoped. The next day, halfway to Rogard, in the middle of the road, a troublesome scene was taking place. A large and beautiful carriage was being assaulted by highwaymen. Around a dozen men, each sporting different types of armor and weapons of varying quality, were laying siege to their victims. The scene was stark, but it didn't look like a normal robbery. All over the path were bodies and lots of blood. One female knight was holding her shield high, defiance written on her features, while her two fellow soldiers were lying on the ground in pools of their own blood. However, the dozen bandits seemed slightly hesitant, as still leering at the woman before them. A dozen of their companions, most of them cut to pieces, littered the ground between them and the last standing resistance. "Give up, cunt." The leader of the bandits shouted, "Surrender, and we'll let you live." After taking turns with their body anyway. There were no cheers or follow-ups. The rest of the bandits might have been scum, but they hadn't stayed alive this long by throwing themselves into obvious danger. The knight didn't answer, instead taking a ready stance. The first to step forward would be cut in half. And even if it meant giving up her life, these bastards would never get to lay their eyes on the precious cargo inside the carriage. Just a little longer, the knight thought, a patrol should show up any minute now. According to the ruling noble of this area, there were regular patrols along the path. Also, according to the same noble, there were no bandits prowling said path. If such noble lied in the report, then executions would be in order, assuming someone survived to make the report to the capital, that is. The spell is ready. A headed man shouted, "I'm putting her to sleep. Don't forget to bind her before starting any fun." Now the bandits cheered, both in relief and lust. The knight was about to panic, half of her mind screaming that interrupting the spell was vital to avoid defeat, and yet the rest reminded her that her cargo couldn't be exposed to danger upon changing her position. She could only pray for a hero to arrive. Stomp. 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 The loud sound was accompanied with rhythmic tremors. Every living person present turned toward the source, knowing very well that such sounds belonged to a massive creature, the kind that would no doubt eat them all, and then continue to trample some random city's walls. They didn't expect to see a carriage being pulled by a small behemoth. What the actual F? Twack. An arrow impacted the skull of the bandit, killing him in an instant. His demise was enough to make all the others lose their composure completely. "Nice shot." Dust exclaimed from atop the carriage, his praise seconded by Lin. "I was actually aiming at the one who looked like the boss though," Keith muttered as he nicked a second arrow. At the reins, Izuku made his best effort to ignore the archer's confession, and repressed the nausea from seeing someone die in front of him, again. "Protect the people," Izuku commanded, finding it hard to swallow how the other adventurers followed his command, and how likely they were going to kill the bandits as a result. Anything else is secondary. The Emerald Archdruid wished that the bandits would run away. A couple of minutes later, it had been a total victory, so one-sided that it was more like a massacre. Much to his dismay, Izuku Midoriya felt like all that blood was on his hands. Why didn't they run away? Why didn't they try to surrender, to beg for their lives? It was inhumane, but Izuku remembered why this was a common occurrence. There was no prison for bandits, only death. There were no human rights for those who decided to live outside the laws of the kingdoms. Rather than having their belongings being sent to their families, their bodies were being looted by the adventurers that had killed them. Seeing Dust and his party, even the sweet and caring Lin, strip the bodies of the outlaws like it was expected of them was making Izuku's stomach churn. "Adventurers." The female knight called to the group, "I request that you stop what you are doing." Finally, Izuku muttered, still sitting on the carriage, not wanting to have anything to do with the disgraceful show of inhumanity unfolding. "Someone sends. I need you to take us to Axel at once." The knight stated in a firm voice, "You'll be handsomely compensated for this service, and I will add a bonus to compensate for setting aside your looting rights." "What?" Izuku couldn't help his shout. Was it too much to ask for some humanitarian sensitivity? "Why?" The knight looked ready to explode with indignation, as if taking offense, but immediately controlled herself. "My lady is being afflicted by some severe ailment. No one knows if it is a curse or some other form of malediction, and I fear she may not have enough time." The knight explained, obviously pained. Her only hope is to take her to the town of Axel, where a sage has been sighted, someone said to be able to deal with any sort of affliction. "I see," Izuku replied with a heavy voice. "Curses, afflictions of unknown origin and a sage." That had to be Keel. Izuku wanted to say no. This wasn't his responsibility. He actually hated how inhumane the people of this world acted. But, looking at their carriage, he knew that there was no repairing it. The bandits had done quite the number on it, not only destroying the wheels with magic, but breaking the entire undercarriage as well. Even complaining about using the lethal force felt wrong after seeing the other two guys dead on the ground. They had given their lives to protect whoever was inside, and leaving her to her own fate felt like disrespecting the dead. What about your dead comrades? Izuku asked, still hesitant to accept the request. Saving this one life would set him back, and not just for a few days. Winter was coming, meaning that he'd be stuck back in Axel for months. They knew the risks and the knight started with a sullen voice. I can revive them. Just to be interrupted by a girly voice. The young girl exited the direct carriage, sporting blonde hair and a blue nun habit. Just give me 10 minutes. The nun continued as she approached the fallen soldiers. You need that time to move the sick lady anyway. Understood. The knight replied and then moved to the carriage to assist the individual within. Izuku felt immediately annoyed by the attitude. This knight had decided on her own that they were entitled to his carriage, that he had no right to deny them. If he were to be honest, this world wasn't exactly deserving of his every kindness. Truth be told, the life of a single noblewoman would be insignificant when weighed against all the lives that would be lost on the front lines, if he had to return to Axel, and forced to spend the winter there. He got ready to explain his point to the knight. He got ready to order his new friend to resume the march to the next city. Hold still, Melody. The knight said to the rather petite girl in her arms, only part of her blonde hair visible due to the cloth enveloping her. We'll make it in time. I swear upon my life. Then Izuku saw the face of the girl. The cold sweat, the pain. Megumin and Liza had been by his sides the entire time, silent observers to the whole ordeal. And now, Megumin had a resigned smile on her face. She knew exactly what was going to happen. Megumin, get inside and arrange for one of the couches to be cleared for the girl. Izuku requested, sounding resigned and yet sporting an apologetic smile. Guys, move the luggage so the revived soldiers can ride up there with you. There was a sense of satisfaction at seeing his orders being carried out without hesitation. It really felt good to be listened to, one of the few good perks of coming to this world. As Megumin entered the carriage to ensure there would be enough room, Izuku turned to his faithful companion. Liza, can you help that knight with the girl? Izuku's request was immediately answered with a nod and a grunt from the albino gator girl. Be gentle. Izuku's warning came with an odd sense of urgency, something the female knight didn't fail to notice. The woman looked tired, her rather slow pacing an obvious sign that fighting the bandits took a lot out of her. Carry, Liza said as she reached her target. The knight frowned at the sight of the slave before her. Her self-restraint was made obvious as she bit back curse words, obviously aware that she needed the help of the boy with the carriage, and that she had no strength left to force him to cooperate. There's no way I will surrender her to you, the knight spat with as much politeness as she could. There is no way a brute like you would treat my lady with the required kindness. A cherished slave was still a slave. A slave trained for heavy lifting would treat the noble in her hands just like any piece of luggage. Slaves were slaves for a reason, and their reliability would not change no matter how well trained and cherished they were. The knight had come to this conclusion while seeing the albino lizard woman approaching, clad in armor while looking clean and well-fed. Both the worker and sextor, no doubt. Liza didn't even stop when she reached the pair. She didn't acknowledge the voice, the defiance, or anything really. She simply understood that the armored human wasn't going to let go of the sick human. She still needed to bring the sick human into the carriage though. She went for the easiest solution. What the hell are you doing? She lifted both the armored lady and the sick girl into her arms. How? Why? She even walked faster than the knight could when not carrying anything at all, reaching the carriage in no time. For the albino gator girl, there was no difference between carrying 1, 2, or a dozen of anything. Her master wanted them inside the carriage, so she'd remember me to never get on her bad side, Taylor muttered while watching the scene. The knight had heavier gear than him, and Liza didn't give a single fuck about it. Does she have a good side? Keith muttered, besides whatever side she shows to Izuku. Gatorkin are scary. Dust just shuddered while remembering how Liza had nearly killed him, with a glancing blow. Lin didn't comment. Izuku was equally kind and scary, trying to split hairs was pointless. Suddenly, a black harpy landed on the roof of the carriage. Chika saw no more baddies nearby. The black harpy reported, causing the mediocre adventurers to wince. Master got new friends. The albino gator girl was intimidating, and the adventurers accepted that she would probably tear them apart with zero effort if they ever offended Izuku, but at least her mere existence didn't hurt them. She could hurt them every time she spoke. The black harpy could also hurt monsters with her mere voice. And Izuku had her around all day and night. In the writer's seat, Izuku sighed. He was defeated yet again by his need to save people. The girl was suffering, and she was not responsible for the problems plaguing him. Sacrifices were unacceptable, at least that's what his heart told him. Sacrificing her for the sake of his mission would be not only hypocritical, but inhumane. If he were to be honest, he would admit that if he had decided to leave them behind, he would have turned back to help them within 5 minutes. Master, okay? Liza asked as she resumed her preferred position by his side. Izuku sighed in defeat. Don't worry, it's just a case of Izuku being Izuku, despite his best efforts to be different. Megumin replied as she took her seat yet again. It's just, Izuku trailed off, seeking something, anything to blame. I'm tired of things not going as they should be. Crossing the gates of Axel was going to be exceedingly embarrassing now, rescue of a noble or not. Master is feeling down, Chika asked, and then smiled as she got a bright idea. Chika knows how to make Master feel better. Izuku blinked in confusion. He quickly panicked as the petite avian girl guided Megumin to change seats, or rather, guided her to sit on his lap. Both teens blushed for a moment. Does this? Megumin stammered a little, but quickly began to lean onto her boyfriend. Help. Izuku stammered too, but then hugged his girlfriend. Does basking in the warmth of the petite crimson demon truly helped to soothe the nerves of the archdruid. The contact felt natural, and while their romance was not as intense as they had seen with a few couples in Axel, it was slowly escalating in how comfortable they were getting in public. We are ready up here. The nun called from atop the carriage. One look at the two soldiers was more than enough to understand that the priest had used raise the dead, and not resurrection. The poor guys were going through revivification sickness, their stats lowered, and their senses muddled until they had a chance for a proper rest. A small window behind Izuku slid open. Everything's ready inside too. Union reported with a tone of satisfaction, as if fulfilling some sort of duty, although I wish that the night lady would stop acting as if we were kidnappers. She can get out if she doesn't like it there. Megumin bit back on Izuku's behalf, taking offense at such attitude. I apologize. The knight quickly retorted, I humbly accept your aid in this endeavor. So, please, let's start moving. The woman didn't sound apologetic or humble, but Izuku knew that making the girl suffer more than strictly necessary was not the right answer. Alright then, Izuku finally said, and then directed his voice to the friend he had created. Let's go back to Axel, Kamo. The name that was chosen for the behemoth was that, Kamo. Chika said it was cute. Liza said it was small. Union called it adorable. Seeing that the consensus was that if the creature didn't mind the name as long as it got it, he went for a combination of small and cute in Japanese. Because he knew a certain explosive blonde would probably get an aneurysm if he ever caught wind of such thing. Stomp. 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 And thus, the carriage turned around and began its trek back to the town of beginners. This time faster than before, but still at a peaceful pace. Behind a tree overlooking the scene, Chris sighed in relief. The hero would return to Axel, meaning more opportunities to reach out to the beloved of Ariel. At least I didn't have to intervene, Chris muttered, turning to look at the corpse below her. Too much. Following that carriage had been a nightmare. The beast Izuku created was more than just a mindless golem or a primitive awakened bush. It had intelligence, malevolent intelligence even. Whenever she got even a little close, it turned its head as if to search for her, and she was pretty damn sure it didn't want to cuddle up to her. Finding these people had been a sort of a blessing, really. She knew the boy was too soft for his own good, that there was no way for him to not take in the injured and the sick, before delivering them back to town. Of course, she wasn't going to stay idle either. That group of bandits was larger than what it seemed at first. They had a sentry ready to run back to their main hideout to gather reinforcements if things turned ugly. Slitting the throat of said sentry had been an easy way to support the archdruid, even though she couldn't boast about the feat. Now back to Axel. Chris muttered with unsettling happiness, time to worm my way into that party, and into the heart of the beloved. Winter was coming, and the thief knew all too well that Izuku would not move during that time. Being so soft-hearted was the most exploitable of his weaknesses. Magnus, I seriously encourage you to read the notes. I'm honored you find this entertaining and to your liking, but it feels awkward when people praise effort and planning I'm not giving to this story. Even though I'm trying to increase quality, this is just a practice of tropes, not the real isekai project. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Bye-bye, everyone.